think it's Ward 1 Bite Me. And yeah, I know I was on speaker.
Call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please note those in attendance? Thank you. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jump into item 2A, minutes of the regular city council meeting on January 10th, 2023. I trust everyone's had a chance to look at the minutes. I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Moving on to item 2B, minutes of the city council work session on January 17th, 2023. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
2 abstentions. Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Item 3, adoption of the agenda. We have a couple amendments, or at least one. I trust you've all seen the email from late last week. We're going to move what was item 8A, 2023 legislative priorities up to, and create a new item 5A, and then the ordering will change thereafter. And beyond that, does anyone else have any corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Moved. Second.
A motion a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. Item 4, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. All right, jumping into item 5A, 2023 legislative priorities. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. In 2021, the City Council adopted their first legislative priorities agenda. In 2022, we also did the same. In 22, they were identify 50% funding needed for the public safety. It's now out of order. Sorry. Excuse me, identify 50% funding of the public safety facility project, increase the deputy registrar filing fees for reimbursement to provide customer service, and seek legislative relief for cities impacted by the district court's order for residential watering ban. Staff, mayor, city council worked hard to move the 2022 legislative agenda forward last year to no avail at the legislature, but did accomplish building a strong rapport with our legislators. So since the state bonding bill was not approved last year, the city council chose to move forward with our public safety facility project. Therefore, not requiring that to be a legislative priority anymore. The City Council did have a work session on January 17th, and the Mayor and City Council discussed potential 2023 priorities and requested the following 3 be brought forward for further consideration. So on your screen, we have 2 that remain the same, which are increase the deputy registrar filing fees to reimburse ourselves for the services that we provide from the state, on behalf of the state, to seek legislative relief for the cities impacted by the district court's order for a residential watering ban, assistance to allow the city of White Bear Lake to continue to operate under its currently approved water supply plan and comprehensive plan through their approval periods. And lastly, the city council discussed THC. We've discussed this quite a bit over the last year and decided this should be considered for a legislative priority, and that we should maintain local control for municipalities regarding the potential statewide THC and legal cannabis regulations and the ability to license and zone those related businesses. City of White Bear Lake is also part of the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities, who also create annual legislative priorities agenda. Metro Cities is a little bit too large for me to include in the packet, but I did include the summary of LMC's 23 legislative priorities. You will see in that handout in your packet that we share the priority of THC legal cannabis regulation. So With that, I will stand for questions and further discussion.
Great, thank you, Ms. Crawford. Why don't we jump right in? We're lucky enough to be joined by the newly elected Senator Gustafson, so if you'd like to step forward, maybe you can share with us what you know about all this and what's going on at the legislature and maybe some of the progress that's already been made on at least a couple of our agenda items there. Please.
Well, thank you, Mayor Lewis-Smith. I think it's on.
Yeah.
You can all hear me. I'm a teacher. And thank you to everybody here. First of all, I do want to just say hi, introduce myself. I'm Heather Gustafson. I live in Vadnais Heights. We've lived here about 12 years, just down the road. We don't have a ton of, restaurants in Vadnais Heights. We do have a couple that I'd highly recommend, but White Bear is usually where we sort of hang out and spend a lot of time with our family. So very, very proud to represent you at the state legislature. And I hope that this will be the first of several conversations we can have and open up a line of communication. I've already, met with your mayor and Lindy, of course, and amazing. We've already, I feel, have started off on a really good foot. And so I hope that continues. No decision that I make there doesn't involve, how would somebody in Lino Lakes, White Bear, Vadnais, and so forth be affected by this. And so, we might not always agree on everything, but before I leave, I'm happy to give you my number, and I would encourage you to use it if there's ever a problem, especially here in White Bear, that I might not know about right away. One of the problems with being at the legislature is you find yourself in a bubble really fast, and I'm trying to be as mindful and deliberate as possible as staying in touch with my community, but it does get hard, especially right now when we're just right in the middle of it. So I'm going to really lean on all of you to tell me, what's going on that maybe I've missed or something that I can do to help. I'd like to be that person for you. So, like I said, I'm happy to share my number. I'm guessing this is recorded and probably broadcast somewhere. Otherwise, I'd give it to you now. But I don't know. I don't know that that's a great idea. So I'll just give it to you individually later on. But so I'm happy to talk about some of those things. I'm really glad. We met. I believe it was December. So it was before we had really gotten started, which was very smart to sort of like catch me early, because now it's pretty crazy there. But a couple of things that took me a minute to sort of figure out how to get them into our plan. But and I wanted to come here with Senate file numbers so that you could all track them and watch the progress happen. And of course, I'm going to lean on all of you to come testify. But the revisor is pretty backed up right now, and so I don't actually have the jackets, and I haven't been able to. It doesn't have a number yet. It hasn't been assigned a number yet. But increasing the deputy registrar filing is something that I've already put forward. So we're going to do that, and I've this was one of those things that I learned, that it was the legislature that really sort of controls that pricing. I don't really think that's fair. That seems like something you should be able to decide for yourself, but nevertheless, we'll make it happen. So I think that that's a fairly easy ask. So we'll see. But like I said, as soon as I have those numbers for you, I will share them so you can track them and follow along. When it comes time to present, I'm going to hold you all accountable for coming to testify and tell us why it's necessary, because that probably will surprise some other people as well. I hear your concerns on THC. I also share those as well. It's popular by not everybody, right? It's sort of controversial. We get that, but it is, something that's sort of been ramping up this way. I've always felt about it like this: it's not something I use. I don't know much about it. I know that the way it was rolled out last session was terrible, so we don't want to do that again. I am in favor of you all having local control over this. I agree. Mayor Lewis-Smith was talking about it should just be like it is with liquor licenses. I fully agree with that. So I'll do what I can. I am confessing to everybody, the bill is just dropped like last week, and it's this thick. I am the vice chair of Education Finance, which is very busy right now, and I have not had a time to dive into that bill. So I'm hoping to, take 3 weeks off from work and read it. But kidding. But yes, I will make sure that I'm advocating for that. And the reason I wanted to sort of tie that into my next thing was because the governor today released his budget for $300 million for public safety dollars. Now, Originally, last session, that meant that police departments would get money that they could use and decide for themselves what they wanted to do with it, right? It was complete local control. I agree with that, and I'm going to try to make sure that that happens. I've already reached out to the Senate Majority Leader this afternoon as soon as the budget dropped, and I said I would like to author that bill. I would like to make sure that my police departments in both Savannah Heights, we contract out with Ramsey County, but White Bear, Lino Lakes, Centennial, all of those areas are taken care of. I want to, I know that short staff is a problem, right? I know that the workload is thin. And then if we are going to put, cannabis on top of that, that's not fair to our police officers. So I'm going to do my very best. I'm only one vote, but I promise you I'm a hard worker. So I'm going to really make sure that our police are funded before, so that they can properly do this, right? The whole goal is to keep everybody safe. I agree with that. I have some concerns with this as well, but I will voice those to those, who are in charge of this bill, and we'll move forward that way. But I would love for you to sort of stay in touch with me on that as well. If you're seeing something, I don't catch everything all the time as fast as it comes out, right? There are a lot of committees and a lot of people moving. So if you do see something, please call, email, let me know right away. But I just want you to know that a lot of the concerns you have, I put myself in your shoes. If I was in charge of White Bear Lake, that would be my concern as well, too, right? Especially since we all have our own, police department here, too. Which brings me to the other thing, the public safety facility. While it's not bonding, I do know that nothing got done last session, and so a lot of places are shortchanged. This isn't you, and I don't know if there's a rivalry. I haven't figured it out yet. It feels like there might be, but White Bear Township needed some things, and so we're trying to help them as well. But I also know that it was, $6.2 million last session that you were asking for? Is that correct? I want to make sure. Okay, but that price has gone up. Is that correct or no?
Well, 6.2 represented the 50% of the then cost, and the cost has now gone up by $5 million. So the total project is now over $17 million. What
Sure.
we were trying to achieve last year was 50% of what the
Right,
projected
so you were covering
cost was
half,
gonna
and then
be.
half would have been 6.2. So now you're saying 8 is what that's where we're at, 8, 9.
Our working understanding of this
Yeah.
has been once you start the project, it no longer qualifies, but we all kind of acknowledge in a work session
Yeah.
that this is an odd year and there's a lot of surplus money. So if there's a mechanism to pay for any
Yeah.
portion of the building, I promise we'll cash the state's check and help offset those costs.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you talking me out of this?
yeah.
Is this what you want me to do?
So $8 million would be great, $17 million would be ideal, but yeah, if there is a mechanism to do so, to help us defray the costs of that would be great, because
Yeah.
as we've talked at length, our police department serves beyond just the city limits. We have contract cities, and our facilities themselves have historically been a regional hub for law enforcement to do training and other things. So we have a much bigger scope than just the city, and as it stands right now, the city is carrying the full freight, and we as a body decided it was a project worthwhile. We'll foot the bill ourselves, but seeing what the state is funding other projects and how much they're funding other projects, we'd like some help if we can get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you brought up the township. I just want to add for commentary, we are their fire department.
Yeah, okay, got it. Heard. Okay, well, we will make that adjustment. That has just gone to research, and then we'll proceed to the reviser, so it is not too late to do that. But what I'm going to ask for is just a special supplemental funding that should sort of be a stopgap, right? Because last year was, now I don't know if I'll get it, and I don't know if it'll be the full amount, but I'm going to tell you I will fight like heck to make sure that we'll see as far as we can go with it. I don't want to overpromise, and I'm certainly not here to just say everything you want to hear, but it is important to me that some of these dollars get used. You are probably not surprised to learn that that surplus is not exactly what the surplus is, right? After you adjust for inflation, it's not there. But it doesn't mean that there aren't dollars there, and it doesn't mean that I'm not willing to fight for them for my own district. So I'm going to do what I can, and I'm sort of here to let you know what my intentions are, and then I'm going to ask you to sort of, keep me in the loop about what's going on, as I will you as well. So, like I said, I really appreciate your reaching out to me. I really appreciate the information that you've shared. As with any new job, sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to learn the ropes before I get back to you, but, we're doing it. So I think that was all I'm sorry, the water ban. How could I forget that? The big thing. So I know it's sort of on a standstill. I know it's sort of a mess. I know it's it's controversial and it's a complicated issue. All I'm going to say about it right now, because I don't have a lot of new information, is that I've already been meeting with Karin Housley on it. We are going to pull together some, at the legislature anyway, some sort of bipartisan stakeholders and really come up with a few things. And then I was so pleased to hear that you already have a regional meeting in the works for February. Hopefully we'll be able to be invited and attend. Yeah, we really do want to make that a complete I really think a lot of things should be bipartisan, but that for sure sort of needs to involve everybody who's willing to come in with good ideas and help out. So I just wanted you to know that that's sort of in the works. I have nothing new to update you on it. We haven't met yet, so I can't, and I'm certainly not going to put any words in her mouth. So I'm just going to leave it at the fact that it's not forgotten. It's on our minds. We really are interested in doing it. It might take some time, so we're just ask for your patience, but also your input. So if that makes sense. Other than that, any questions?
Yeah, no, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to underscore a couple of things. First, with the lake level litigation and the legislation that we're seeking, just know that it's a big, complicated case. So please rely on myself or the city staff to educate you. There's a lot to unpack there, and nobody expects anybody to understand the full backstory right out of the chute. So, utilize our resources, because there's a lot to chew on there.
Yeah.
And until you wrap your head around the whole thing, it's hard to really kind of put it into perspective. So
nothing goes forward without you.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the legislative side, some of the things that we can do is have those initial discussions with DNR, things like that, to sort of maybe speed up some of that process. Sure. But also too, I would love for Senator Housley to sort of tell me where she left off, and then yeah. So, but yeah, I sit next to her in Jobs Committee. We're already talking about it when in between sessions, and everything is going great. So hopefully we can get that situated. But no decisions will be made without you.
Good. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just to underscore on the deputy registrar filing fee, I know we're among every other deputy registrar across the states that's saying the same thing, but we look at it. If you just look at it like a business, our operating costs exceed what our revenues are right now, and that's just a failed business model. Now, we're able to subsidize it, and we recognize the value to the community, which goes so far beyond White Bear. We've developed a reputation of having just a stellar deputy registrar, and as a result, folks that live in areas from outside the community and even from afar, we tend to be the funnel where they come because we do have such good services. So we're kind of now, it's a failed business model, but business is really good from a demand standpoint, and at some point that tips over, and that's sort of what we as a city are dealing with. We can't just do this forever, so that is absolutely critical, having that fee increase to the long-term sustainability of our deputy registrar, and I believe all the deputies across the state. So,
and please remind me, when's the last time you had an increase? It's been a long time, right?
Well, when MinLars or MinDrive came on board, there was an anemic dollar increase on one of the things. 2012 was I think the most recent substantial increase, but we haven't received an increase to my knowledge when Real ID became a thing, and that just is a tremendously long process compared to what the old or regular driver's license model is. So the fees no longer reflect the work that's being done, and forget about having a little bit of a profit. It's not even covering costs at this point. So that is essential.
Okay.
And then on the would-be legalization of marijuana, again, I'll underscore, I really do see that as the same as alcohol or tobacco. That's always been within the purview of local government to zone how we'd like, how we see fit, and license how we see fit. And it's the only way for us to be able to manage this properly and keep it away from schools, the things that nobody disagrees on, but that's the only mechanism by which to do it is local control and the folks that live in the city and govern the city to be able to do it on an individual basis. And I know that's shared amongst municipalities across the state, and I know the League of Minnesota Cities is on that. So we appreciate your support on that. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank you for being here tonight and just opening up a dialogue. I appreciate meeting with Lindy and I last month. I think that's a great first step towards just building a relationship. It's relatively new to this body of government to have a legislative agenda. I think couple of years is when we started it, and I think we're going to continue that going forward. So us having those lines of communication open will be critical to success on both of our parts. So I want to thank you for your willingness to be here tonight and meeting with us and sharing what's going on so far and what I'm sure has been a busy last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, well, again, thank you. I think it's very smart to have a legislative agenda. I don't know who came up with that, but kudos. It's very, very, it's a good way to sort of, it fast tracks things for us, right? If you have a legislative, then I know I can sort of look at review and then we can push things forward. And that there were bills, and again, I will just lean a big thank you to you too for sharing those Senate files or House files at the time. So
Great, yeah, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
I want to open up the council for any questions or comments that they might have.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jones.
First off, congratulations. I don't really mean that as another elected official to another, but thank you for your service and doing what you're doing. I'm going to sound super negative, and none of it's your fault.
Welcome.
You've inherited this bag. After 10 years of serving on this council, I'm now in my 16th year on this council. We didn't really have a need for a legislative agenda. That was Mr. Walsh who planted that seed, and he was absolutely correct. Because what's bothering me the most about what's happened that I've seen is that the legislature has been off hands. Who initiated MNLARS? Did that go through some omnibus bill that I'm not aware of?
Yeah.
Nope, it didn't. Okay, obviously the THC got snuck by the Republicans without, what? We legalized pot? But to sit there and say, well, yeah, it's legal, and I completely agree with the mayor, but what makes me even more scary is I've got the THC positive people out there going, it's safe, it's this. I'm like, how do I know that? Well, they can already get it on internet, so just sell it anywhere. Next door, Kev, sell pot, please, thanks. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Do I have to have a business model
Nope,
that
you
works?
don't. No.
Oh, okay.
Do it like MNLARS. It's great. Sorry, my sarcasm is showing. But
learned all
I'm
about
frustrated, and I appreciate I really do appreciate you're here. But my frustration comes because I think the legislature fell asleep, and they're not doing their job. They weren't doing their job with MNLARS, and we need you to.
Last session, I was just a softball mom, so.
Right.
We'll pay for the sins of your predecessors. Councilmember Jones is going to make you.
Okay.
But this is a big deal. I mean, if I had my way in the last couple of years, I would have said shut down our license bureau because we're failing, we're losing money. But I don't want to do that because it's a key component to bringing people to here to our city halls. You've all heard that. The lake level thing. Yeah, it's big, it's complicated. There's only one body legally can change things, and that's you guys. So change it. You've got other cities that pump water. The science is squishy. Just because one judge decided to take an arbitrary water level, that was, by the way, key piece of information to me on this whole thing, was above the ordinary high water mark of the last 100 years. I don't get it. And that's fine. If you want to make us live by the judge's ban, then state, you're going to pay for all the cities that are pumping right now, you're going to buy us all water. Whether it comes from the Mississippi or St. Croix, Superior, we'll steal from the Colorado River since they're trying to talk about stealing our money or water. I don't
Can I
care.
still have my drinking water in Vadnais Heights, though?
Right. You guys are in it.
Yeah, no, I know.
Right. And so it's just extremely frustrating to see our elected officials sit back and do nothing over the last couple of years. And I know it's a legal process, there's appeals, there's things like that. But it's been very frustrating for me what I have not heard on that. So my, again, negativity and frustration is coming. And then the public safety building, yeah, get us the money. All right? Because I sit here and watch other cities that have not done what they're supposed to do for their infrastructure across the state going, well, and this is from politicians years gone by going, I'm here to lower taxes. I'm not going to raise your taxes, so we're not going to do the sanitary sewer. We're not going to do the stormwater. I'm not going to redo your streets. They cut costs by not doing infrastructure projects, and now they come to the state, and I see this list, and I'm looking at it going, why should taxpayers of White Bear Lake have ABC City in Minnesota pay for your stormwater treatment? when we do that, and you can see my passion, it's very frustrating for me. And then the one time in my time that we come and ask for money, well, you guys can't reach around and grab your rear end with both hands and can't make a decision with $8 gazillion. Unacceptable. So I'm taking this out on you, and I apologize.
Yeah.
I am sincerely happy you're here. You're here as many times as your other predecessor was in his whole time. Okay? I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I'll come as often as I'm allowed, so
Thank you,
thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jones, we want her help. So
I understand that.
like us a little bit.
I better get
get
that
it.
8 million right now. Yeah.
I'm reading you that you understand, and I appreciate that.
No,
Thank you.
and it is actually really nice to hear. I mean, I need to know those things, right? I mean, when people are passionate about something, it means that it's important and should probably go to the front of the line. So I appreciate you telling me that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for coming. Appreciate it. I agree. It's just, this is important. Just to pick up on a few things, just to reiterate, and my colleagues have said, I agree with a lot of what they've said. Just on the THC regulation thing, we've heard a lot from the proponents of the legislation that they want to be treated just like alcohol. You know, you can drink alcohol, it's legal. You know, THC is no worse than alcohol. Okay, fine, then treat it like alcohol and let us license, regulate it like we do alcohol and tobacco as well. So I think that's maybe a talking point for. I'm not even sure how they argue that, the proponents of the legislation. Why or how they make that say, oh, we're not gonna let cities regulate this. Like, whoa. So that's a talking point. On the deputy registrar piece, the language is clear. You know, we want to increase deputy register filing fees. We all agree on that priority. I have another spin on it that I won't speak for them, my colleagues. I'll speak for myself and for Ward 1. I hope we don't do that and then pass that cost on to the people in Ward 1 that have to go get their tabs and pay it. I hope that doesn't get passed on to the customer. We feel like, as we've kind of watched this process happen, as they did Minlar's, the state got new software and pushed a lot of the work down here to this level. So we're spending more time doing data entry and uploading everything. It's easier for the state now to do it, but we're not getting that fee. So, okay, we need a fee increase to cover the cost here in White Bear Lake, but the state should eat that somehow. And I say eat that. I mean, they use the surplus, you know, give them the eat it from their part of the system. So that's kind of my plea on behalf of drivers and people that have to get tabs. Don't pass that cost on to them if possible. So that's my little minor presentation beyond the council's unanimity. On the building, I appreciate your willingness to try and get funding, but it's just, I want to say this because it's not going to be easy because we've already moved on. And part of that is this, I learned this as we went through this process, and I want you to be aware of it because I don't think you'll know, maybe you will. All projects that get state funding through the bonding bill, through the bonding process, have to adhere to a certain building process called B3. It's buildings. There's 3 Bs in it. I can't remember what they are. It's our version. It's Minnesota's version of LEED certified, but it's kind of LEED certified on steroids. Government buildings are the only ones that do it because the law says we have to. That increased the cost of this project tremendously and the time it would take to get it done. You know, and the motive, the goal is environmental friendliness, how we build the building, the waste reduction while we're building it, kind of LEED certified. We share those goals. We weren't going to build a building that was going to be, not environmentally friendly. We weren't going to do that here in White Bear Lake. But when we had to redesign to ask for funding, I think it was like $3 million increase in the cost. I could be overstating that, but I think it was.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right, yeah.
It was a $3 million increase, so we had to sit back and say, well, wait a minute. It's, I think at the time, a $9 million project, when we were talking about it, if we just do it the way we were going to do it, which I would have been able to defend from in terms of building process. If we ask for state money, it's now a $12 million project, and we're going to ask for half. Is it even worth going through all that process and the timing it would take to document and everything else? We decided to do that, had to redesign. We didn't get ahead of ourselves and go down that road, but we had to kind of plan that. So now we're back to, we're going to build it the White Bear way, which is going to be environmentally friendly and just fine, but not B3 certified. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that That's a long-term policy goal. The other part of the problem with B3, in my opinion, is you don't have any control over it. We've kind of made one decision to attach ourselves to this B3 process. It's at the U of M School of Design and Architecture. So if they make changes to it, and they do frequently every few years, you don't even have control over what those changes are. We're tied to it automatically. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I don't think it is. You can look into that. The other piece I'll mention is, you talk about what the state does to cities and increase costs, and everybody means well, but in the design of this new facility, we had to build a storm shelter, or am I going to get this right? I'm going to need help from the engineer. A severe weather storm shelter area that we wouldn't have done the way that we had to do it because of the state building code. It's a bit of an overreaction, I think, to include a building like this to make us, when it's done, you can come visit it. It's going to be kind of a weird outlet on the other side of the building over here that you would say, why is this designed this way? Because the state told us to do that. I think that was $500,000 extra in the cost that we would have done differently. And again, would have planned for safety, certainly, for a storm to come. But we had to do it this way. $500,000 increase in the cost of that building because of a state regulation. So that's another little thing just to keep your eye on and know about as we go. So
Yeah.
thanks for being here.
No, I appreciate it. I can sense the frustration. I can hear sort of that, like, probably people have made lots of promises to you in the past, and like here you sit like paying for this building on your own when you were supposed to have state help. I'm sorry about that. I wish I could go back. I wish I was your senator 2 years ago. Maybe we could have done something different. But and I don't want to make false promises now. I don't want to be here like, I'm going to get you this, and then all of a sudden I'm just another person who let you down. I don't want to do that. So what I am telling you is that I am committed to going home, sending out emails to very specific and deliberate people.
Random, direct, targeted, that's fine.
Right. We'll do a few bake sales. It'll be fine. I will go home. I will, put together this. But I have already been talking with people about this. We are doing other things, not just like this, but some things that are sort of carved out as special cases. I think with public safety being a top priority for me and others, asking for this might not be such a far-fetched idea. But again, the last thing I want to do is come in here and be just another politician promising you something. I promise you I will work hard. I can't guarantee it, but I will try my best, and I will absolutely promise to keep you informed. And, sometimes it takes 1 or 2 sessions to get a few of these things, but I'm in it for the long haul, so 4 years. So I appreciate all of the feedback, and I really hope that it continues. So please stay in touch.
Thank you. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Senator, you used a phrase that caught my ear, that you don't want to tell us things that we want to hear. I actually appreciate that. In the spirit of honest relationship, I want you to tell us things that we don't want to hear. And have you had an opportunity to come across any of those yet? And what are they? And I'm just saying, as one member, when those come up in the future, it's like, that's necessary too.
Yeah. We don't have a $17.6 billion surplus. That is not something people want to hear. But once you adjust for inflation, which I think is the responsible thing to do, it isn't that. Now, that is an excuse to say, like, oh, that's why we can't give you this, or that's why whatever. And again, I am only one voice. I can fight as hard as I can, but in order for anything to get done, I still have to work with people, mostly within my own party, because we are the majority right now, right? And I don't want to, the last thing people want, even if you don't agree with all the decisions coming, is more gridlock. That's what happened last time, and that's why you didn't get your money. So we want to make sure that things are going forward. That's probably the hardest thing for people to accept, is that, that headline grabbed a lot of attention, as it should. I know I talked a lot about it too. The first thing I did was ask for the elimination of Social Security tax, eliminating the tax on Social Security income. And I got a lot of heat for that. Because that was not, in line with some other people's goals and agendas, but it was what I know my district wanted, so I fought for that. Now, and I still find nothing has changed, but I know that not having the surplus that we think that we have, that like there are just going to be compromises all over the place. And so my goal has always been what it's always been, right, is that I, want to take care of my people first, and my people live in Senate District 36. So I'm going to do my very best to try to get us some funding for some of the special projects we need. I know Lino Lakes is very understaffed with their police department. I'm working with them to try to make sure that we can at least fill a couple of those shifts and get the funding they need. I would love to see your public safety the public safety facility get some of that supplemental funding. I'm on your side when it comes to THC. I'm nervous about it too. I've got 4 kids, 2 in high school, 2 in college. These are driving ages. These are out on your own ages. I also am concerned about that too, but I sort of just think like we're all in this together, right? I can go represent you at the Capitol, and you can keep me informed what's going here, and together we can try to just help as many people as we can as best we can. And again, everybody at this, I'm sure I'm probably in a room right now with half of the people who didn't even vote for me, and that's totally fine. What I'm saying is like, I hope going forward we can have a professional relationship where we can just communicate with each other and work together. And I respect you, and I want you to be open with me, even if it's something I don't want to hear too, right? Just don't swear at me, because I can only take so much of that during a day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else on the council?
Just one more thing, Mr. Mayor,
Sure.
if I may. So I forgot my point on what the bigger concern for THC, because it really is 14 employees
Yeah.
at the state right now to manage the safety of that product. That blows my mind, because the federal government isn't involved, right? So if you're going to that's just not enough. And we talk about, okay, if it's a legalized product, who is making sure that what comes into the state is safe? So that's a huge question that I haven't heard, except for, the proponents just wild west saying, just bring it in. They're already getting it on the internet. Okay, well, that's not an answer.
Right. I'm with you. I think one of the things is that, like, it is happening, right? It feels like this train's going down the tracks. My goal as somebody who, cares about my community very much and public safety is to make sure that as it's going down the tracks, I have a role to play in what those tracks look like and how fast that train can go. So I am trying, and I hear what you're saying. We are going to be, and I can't remember, I quoted it with you, I think it's the 22nd state, I might be wrong, to do this. So a lot of what we're doing is learning from Colorado's mistakes, learning from Oregon's mistakes, and then hopefully like going forward in a more responsible way. There's part of me that's relieved that it's going to be something that's regulated and monitored, because then there's a lower chance of it being laced with fentanyl or something like that. As a mom, that does make me feel a little bit better, just knowing that it's going to be something that is regulated. It'll be nice to have extra tax revenue. I don't think it's going to be as much as everyone thinks, but you never know. It's going to
Speak for itself. Great.
Yeah. So we'll see. I do know as a history teacher, prohibition doesn't work. So it's out there, and I would rather have it be like regulated, safe, monitored, and as long as we have the public safety to back it up, which is what I'm going to do my best to do. So, yeah.
Senator, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Just on a closing comment, I want to plant a seed in your head, because the public safety building, I'll keep an open mind. I hope you can get some money for us. I think the ship has sailed on that, and we're just going to be carrying the full freight. But we do have a very large project that's coming down the pipeline, which is the total reconstruction of the downtown White Bear area. It's an aging infrastructure. We need to redo everything. It's been in the works for a long time. That may be something that it may not be directly dollar for dollar for what we asked for from the state for the public safety building, but it's another future project that we could use some help on. And as you mentioned, living in Vadnais Heights, you come to downtown White Bear, and that can be said for someone in Township, in Delwood, and Hugo, and Matamidi, in Stillwater even, North Oaks. Downtown White Bear is the feeder hub. Its reach is so far beyond just the city limits. So we do see that as sort of a regional project, and that is slated for, I think, 24, 25. We're just beginning to the planning stages, but
It
just
won't
an
interfere with Market Fest, though, right?
It might interfere a little bit for 1 year.
Madness.
Hey, I'm all
Market
for
Fest
it.
will come back bigger and better with a shiny new downtown area. So just an FYI on that. That's in the planning stages. So we'll be
That's
in
good.
touch on
Yeah,
that.
see, that's the information I need. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Great.
All right. Well, it's good to see you all.
Thank you very much again for coming in,
Thank you.
Senator. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it and look forward to working with you.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll bring it back to the council. We have a resolution before us with these three legislative items. We've kind of talked it through, and I know this was widely discussed at our work session. Are there any final comments, questions, things we need to discuss? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The resolution is approved. Okay, we're going to move on to item 5B now, the Northeast Youth and Family Services Annual Report and Service Agreement.
It's easier.
Oh, yeah, another government acronym. That's great. I'll go with that. Who's taking this?
I'll take it. Thank you,
Ms.
Mayor.
Crawford.
Mayor, members of the council, we have the president and CEO of NYFS here with us tonight to give you a presentation for their 21-22 report to the community. But just quickly before, as she gets prepared to come up, NYFS is a nonprofit social service agency whose mission is to meet the unmet development needs of at-risk youth and families within the community through collaboration and coordination with existing community resources. The city holds 2 contracts with NYFS with many other communities. One is for a mental health case worker who works on behalf of the cities of White Bear Lake, Roseville, Moundsview, New Brighton, and St. Anthony to assist our police department, as well as our general agreement with NYFS. So both of those are in your packet for approval for renewal for this year, but I'll turn it over to Angela. Thank you.
I thank you for having me. Is there a clicker or do? Okay, sounds good.
Just say slide, and we'll just keep clicking them through.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mayor, City Council members, and City Manager for having me today. My name is Angie Lewis DeMello, and I am the President and CEO of Northeast Youth and Family Services. I have been with the organization since June. I worked with the organization and community before that, and so now really feel like I have a good assessment of where the organization is at and where we're headed. I'm very excited to share that with you tonight. So Northeast Youth and Family Services, just to share a little bit about the background, we're a community-driven nonprofit, and we were founded in 1976. We were founded because 10 municipalities came together and said we have a real need to support youth in our communities, and we need to do something about this and now. And those 10 municipalities pooled funds, and we hired our first 4 staff in 1976. We started with mental health services for youth and with our juvenile diversion services. Both of those services continue today. And now we have expanded our municipal partners and other partners, which I'll talk about. So we have 2 locations. One is in Shoreview, that's our headquarters, and we are in the White Bear Clinic, just up here off of 96, and provide all of our services out of both sites. We really see families as the building blocks of our communities, and so we invest in our healthy families in order to have healthy communities. We're really dedicated to providing services that are trauma-informed and culturally responsive. About 80% of our services are provided to youth and families. We do serve adults in our mental health services as well, but that's really the core of who we're serving. And our goal is to reduce access or increase access by reducing barriers. So a lot of that is about fiscal barriers, cultural and linguistic barriers, but primarily we have services on a sliding fee scale that slides down to 0, which is really unique. And we're really the only, mental health nonprofit in this region serving these areas. Okay. So as I shared, we have these long-standing partnerships with 15 different municipalities, 5 police departments, and 3 school districts. Part of our services are school-based services, which I'll talk about further, and we're in the White Bear Lake School District, Roseville School District, and then Moundsview. One of the really unique things about NYFS is that our board is comprised of city council members largely from the different municipalities that we serve. So we have really direct feedback. About 20 board members, 15 are from city councils. And so we get pretty direct feedback about the needs of communities, and we're able to then drive our services to fill needed gaps. And that's very unique for really the country, not just for our region. In terms of who we served in the last fiscal year, we served about 786 clients, and the majority of those are in our clinic-based services and our school-based services. The 24 you'll see up there is for our day treatment program. It's a small number of people, but it's an intensive program. The youth come to us for 3 hours a day, every day, and then also receive schooling through Mounds View School District with us. What's really, I think, impressive is just the total number of appointments we had for last year. So 786 people, but 21,696 appointments. This really speaks to the depth of care that we're providing. We're seeing people and really kind of holding all of their various needs. You'll also see the number of community advocacy meetings we had, diversion clients, but I think the other piece to point out is we have a model that looks at investing in the whole family, as I've said, and so 657 of our meetings were with families, not just with an individual youth or an individual adult. And we did 337 mental health assessments last year, and those let people get access to care, so those new clients. So a little bit about the organization's fiscal picture. For last fiscal year, you can see where our revenue comes in. We have a variety of different revenue sources, 122,000 about. Last year was from individual donations. We receive about $408,000 of our total revenue through our municipality contracts. 988 was through general contracts and grants. So we're receiving funds from a lot of different sources, government contracts, individual donors, foundations. We also bill third-party insurance revenue for some of our services. Though with the sliding fee scale and ensuring access to care, that's only a portion of our financial support. And then we own the building in Shoreview. And so some of our revenue comes from tenant occupancy there. In terms of expenditures, the biggest services that we have are our mental health services, and then you'll see management in general, fundraising, and our community services in terms of expenditures. Most of our expenses are staff expenses. That's the primary tool for being able to help people. In terms of White Bear Lake, we ran the numbers for the last fiscal year, and I can share this report. We have up through Q3, so this doesn't get all the way to Q4. Oh, is it in the packet? Yeah. So the investment from White Bear Lake was, is it 62,000? No, sorry, 78,193. And the total amount of services that we provided in cost through Q3 was 162,532. So we're really serving a lot of White Bear Lake residents, and in the context of services, you can see the list of what types of care. I want to speak to a minute about the state of mental health care for youth in Minnesota. This has been, so my background, maybe I can share a bit about that. I came up as a therapist. I'm a clinical social worker, moved into administrative roles pretty quickly, and most of my background is doing trauma therapy with youth. And came to NYFS because I'd done some consulting for the organization on integrating trauma-informed practices back in 2015, 2016. If any of you know Jerry, I worked with Jerry. And then saw the position opened and was really excited because I really care about the mission. The staff are amazing, and it just felt like a really good fit. But what I would say is we've never seen anything like what we're seeing right now in terms of state of youth mental health. And it's coupled with an incredible amount of attrition from the mental health field. So I'll speak to both of those things. What we're seeing is clients that have many more severe mental health concerns and resource challenges than we've ever seen before. Kids that would come in kind of a little depressed now are coming in highly suicidal with a plan. And kids that are coming in, with incredible panic attacks, nightmares, inability to function at school, inability to function in relationships. I would say the COVID also had some major impacts on youth development, and so kind of the launching that youth are supposed to do in adolescence, they're really struggling to do. A lot of difficulty with that social relationship. Sometimes it's gaming all night, not getting any sleep, and then not being able to function at school. So the severity and then just the number of trauma experiences the youth that we serve. We used to have, we do an assessment called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Assessment, and we used to have most of the youth maybe 2 to 4 adverse childhood experiences, and we know that those are high in the general population, higher in mental health seeking populations. Now the youth that we're seeing are coming in with 9, 10, 11 adverse childhood experiences, and they're 12. And so the amount of trauma that we're seeing, and then just the acuity in terms of symptoms and severity is heartbreaking. And then what's happening is we're just losing all of the therapists in the field. So people are moving out of the social services in general. I'm not sure if you saw the Star Trib article, but we lost 30,000 nonprofit professionals in the last 2 years that have moved out of the nonprofit sector. And I've had staff that their mental health concerns are so significant they don't feel like they can provide care anymore. And so whenever we have someone leave, and this is across the whole sector, they're not taking another mental health job. They're taking a job outside of the field. And so we have such incredible need, and then we have so few providers. And so I'll talk about what NYFS is trying to do to manage this, but we knew coming into COVID that we were going to have major workforce shortages. That's been projected for a long time. What we didn't expect was accelerated retirements and the number of people that are just moving out of the industry. And my hope is that they'll come back after a little break, but we don't know. So in terms of youth mental health now, there's a 3-fold increase in diagnosable mental health conditions. We're seeing 1 in 3 youth have a diagnosable mental health condition. And if you look at the Minnesota Student Survey, which just recently came out, for Ramsey County specifically, 19% of 11th grade males are self-reporting 6 months or longer mental health challenges, and 46% of 11th grade girls. That's almost 1 in 2. And we can maybe guess that some of that's underreported, especially in the males. And so 6 months is a very long time to be suffering from mental health condition and then to not be able to access services. And then in terms of adverse childhood experiences, so those forms of trauma, 43% of 11th grade males and 64% of 11th grade females are reporting at least having 1 adverse childhood experience. And again, this is general population, so what we're seeing in clinic is much higher. So we're really at a crisis point. The American Academy of Pediatrics and a few other organizations came together and declared it a national emergency because of, if you play this out, what happens when these kids are, do they go to college, they go to trade school, do they get a job, can they function in their job, can they take care of themselves, can they pay their bills? I mean, all of these things could have pretty dire effects 3, 5, 10 years from now. So NYFS is trying to do everything we can to help with this. Some of this is based on the services that we're providing. So we have 3 primary mental health programs, or clinic-based services. And in clinic, we provide individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, group therapy for kiddos as young as 4 all the way throughout the lifespan. We have services that are both in-person and telehealth. And then we're doing all sorts of kind of new modalities because we're learning a lot about how people process things, and not everybody does that verbally. So we've added art therapy, we've added play therapy. Play therapy is a particularly validated intervention for youth, especially youth with trauma and especially youth of color. It's a very effective intervention, so we're adding that. And then the trauma therapies that we have. As I said, we have school-based services. We're embedded in 3 school districts. Embedded really means that we're not just seeing the individual, we're not just operating a clinic in the school. We're not seeing the individual clients as our only client. We see the school as our client. And so we're providing support to teachers, we're providing support to deans, we're providing support when there's a systemic crisis and something happens and people are struggling. And then we're in elementary through high schools. And then our 3rd mental health program is our day treatment program. Our day treatment program is middle school and high school, and this is for folks that have really high acuity, so lots of severe symptoms and are struggling to function in a typical school setting. And they'll come to us, and we're kind of a step down from inpatient, but a step up and a step down from residential. They get to be in community, go home to their families, but they get more intensive mental health services every day. So those are our mental health programs. And then our community services programs, we have our youth diversion program. This program, we have youth that are referred for a variety of different things. They don't have to have a criminal charge. They can be referred through a school resource officer or from someone in the community, family even, that identify that the youth has engaged in a crime. And so that could be theft, drug use, vaping, those are the kinds of things that we see. Destruction of property, some interpersonal crimes like domestic assault of a family member, those kinds of things. It's meant to be an alternative to the traditional justice model, and we do it based on restorative principles. So we're working, helping them with restitution. They attend educational seminars. We engage their families, and we try and get underneath whatever the issue is, which might be housing, resources, trauma at home, mental health problems. And we're also seeing a steep increase in the number of youth in our diversion services that need referrals to mental health care. Our Community Connections program is our newest fancy program, and our Community Connections program came because we did these focus groups with the youth and asked them what they needed, and this is what they asked for. So what's nice about this is that it doesn't require a licensed mental health therapist, but it can have a really broad impact. And so this works with youth mostly in high school who are struggling with all the different things that we've talked about. And they come for a 7-week program, and we do mentorship, they do life skills, they do a tour of Century College, they go to the libraries and learn about those resources, they make a budget, they do all sorts of things to kind of help them prepare for their next steps. And they do some career exploration and then match with a mentor of a career that they're interested in so they can learn more about it and do an informational interview. And what's amazing about that program, we've done 2 pilots, and we've had 100% attendance every single night from every single youth, which just never happens with teenagers. And so you can just really see how thirsty they are for these services. And then our final service is our community advocacy service. This is a service that we offer to White Bear Lake. And the goal of this service is for us to be able to provide support outside of what is the role of law enforcement. So these are frequent callers to law enforcement. We're helping with everything, case management, domestic violence, homelessness, mental health resource access, chemical dependency, neighbor disputes. I mean, just kind of whatever it is that those, especially repeat callers, need, we want to be able to help support them. So that's a little about what we offer. And then finally, just to share a little bit about where we're heading, we want to continue to expand that Community Connections program because it is such a successful program for youth. We're looking at the community advocacy program and wanting to expand that. Right now, it only serves adults, and we want to add a youth advocate, and we potentially want to add an elder advocate and a domestic violence advocate. There's not a lot of services for that around here. And then I would say we're really working to increase the pipeline of providers by adding an internship, becoming an internship site, adding intern programming, subsidizing some of the most internships in the mental health field are unpaid, so trying to provide some paid internships specifically for BIPOC providers. And then I would say the other piece is really thinking about staff sustainability and wellness. We're not going to be able to keep providers if they're not well paid, if they're not supported, if they don't have the resources at their disposal. We're just going to keep seeing the attrition. And so it's a particular passion area of mine. We're doing a lot structurally to try and support staff retention. And then getting creative about the limited resources we have. So if we have limited resources, how do we have that one therapist do a group with 10 families, get eyes on 10 kids on our 3-month wait list, rather than seeing one kid with that amount of time. So we're trying to get creative and triage really at this point is where we're at. So that's what I got.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It sounds like you guys are doing a tremendous amount of good with relatively few resources, so we appreciate the good work. Council, do we have any questions for Ms. Lewis DeMello? Councilmember Edward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't need convincing that we have mental health crises in our communities. I get that we have more folks seeking treatment, fewer providers able to service them. Mm-hmm. That creates a bind. I'm looking at your budget, and you made had a net increase of unrestricted assets of about $47,000 last year on a budget of $3.3 million. Pretty skinny.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 questions. Mm-hmm. As with the services that you're offering, are we reasonably confident that those that are able to receive treatment are getting better? Do we have a sense that because mental health is a really complex topic, and there's all kinds of ways that goes sideways, upside down, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about what you're seeing that's working and why we know it works, mm-hmm. and then what's the strategy for doing more of that?
Yeah, so it's a very complex question, so I appreciate that. What we know works is wraparound services. We know that resource-intensive services are what is most supportive of a youth's and a family's healing. And part of that has to do with the individual attention, part of that has to do with connecting with other people in the community. And we do program evaluation, we see very good outcomes for the folks that get into services. And part of that is, the average time that someone is in psychotherapy in a kind of youth setting is somewhere between 9 months to a year on average. So that's an intensive amount of time, intensive amount of resources. I would say and then in our diversion program, in terms of outcomes, we have a 97% success rate, only 3% recidivism. And so we feel very, very proud of that. We've been doing this a long time. We know what works. And so I feel very confident about the outcomes we have. The difficulty really is, what we've talked about, the workforce issues, and then trying to think about how do we get these kids before they're on the wait list for so long and if we can just get eyes on them, I think is a big part of that. So having them in a group setting. And I think the other thing is the earlier we get to them, the more capacity the family has. The family isn't as kind of exhausted and worn from trying to figure out how to support a youth, especially if there's some behaviors that are problematic. And so when we can get early and we can provide the support to the parents and the support to the youth, then often they'll have the resources to be able to kind of handle it on their own, but we need to get them those resources as early as possible. And so those are the discussions we've been having around what is our goal? For a long time, our goal was to start with someone, to create a treatment plan, and for them to come out of services with no more symptoms or very low symptoms of whatever their mental health concern is. And I think it's really challenging us and our profession to look at, okay, what are the small things that we can do to help people keep their head above water until we're able to bring back the workforce. And the need is really high. I also think there's so much less stigma than there was even a few years ago. So the amount of folks that are, willing and able to access resources is better. So, it's both good and challenging. Yeah.
So what's the strategy for more funding?
I think the primary thing is I came into the organization and there was a lot of attention needed on our operational side. Part of what happened was there was a lot of downward pressure because some things had gone unattended. We hadn't recontracted for insurance since the 1990s, so our rates were lower than other mental health clinics. There was some operational efficiencies we really needed to attend to. So I've spent my first 6 months with the leadership team, which is wonderful, trying to clean all that up, and then to move. We were about $10,000 under average market for salaries for therapists, so it makes recruitment pretty impossible, and especially in this environment. So we got salaries up, we got benefits up. I think that it's really, the business model, if we look at the business model, we can make it work. We just have to have all the things kind of just right in place. And so, and then I would say in general, larger strategy is making sure that we're seeking and receiving the contracts, seeking and receiving the grants, individual donations, kind of helping people understand what NYFS needs and how unique we are in the region that we're serving,
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Thank you for what you do and your organization. So what I'm hearing, what I've experienced from having children go through the school district, and I'm kind of parented during that time where it wasn't acceptable, right? But during that same time, it was like, okay, I've got mental health awareness. I was the dad that said, don't use drugs, right? We'll do it the old-fashioned school way. I was so wrong, and it kills me because I was a bad father because of that to one of my daughters. And if I wouldn't have been more open-minded, but sometimes it takes a ball-peen hammer and a big one. So I'm sitting here going, how many parents are out there like me that have children, and especially compounded with what you're experiencing today with the staffing issues, that are reaching out and they're standing in line, whether it's, and this isn't, I'm not picking on NYFS, but it's like if some family comes to you and say, you can't handle them, you can't take them, it's going to be 6 months. And I heard I heard you say the folks that get into services. That bothered me, not because you said it, it was realistically put. What can you do from the aspect that you're in a waiting line? What can be done at that point, where it's like you're 6 months out?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's 6 months out everywhere. I mean,
Right.
unless you're willing to pay private pay, $150 or $200 a session.
And that's the issue that
yeah.
I'm facing with, yes, these folks have some money, but they've got one kid in college, if not two, and they've, whatever level of education, the cash isn't there to do that, nor do they have the health care that would support that. But my question is, it's like, okay, what are you doing, what is the industry doing to work that 6-month list? That's now it's 9, it's 12. What's happening to these families is really an overall picture. I don't want to paint you into it, but I see it as.
No, I go to bed with that every night. So I think that we're trying to be as creative as possible in terms of strategies. One of the things is really working our wait list. So having program assistants that call the wait list at a regular frequency, check in with the family. How are you doing? What do you need? Is there any other referrals I can provide? So really trying to make sure that we have regular contact with folks is one small thing, but when something bubbles up, then we can get them to someone to talk about it. We have a triage process in our wait list so that the folks that have the highest acuity, if there's something like a death in the family or a severe trauma, that they can move up the list and get more immediate care. But I think this triaging and providing group support is really, and then the other thing that we've been trying to do is work with some of the Lions Clubs and some of the other community organizations to do some trainings for parents so that we can talk about like mental health, coping skills. These are the ways that you can support your kid so that things don't, they may not get a whole lot better, but if they can not deteriorate, that would be wonderful. And then there's long-term strategies. We need to work with the legislature to have reimbursement. I mean, reimbursement revenue from insurance doesn't cover it's not a business model that works. It doesn't cover the salary and benefits, much less the overhead to run an organization. And so we have a system that isn't, reimburses mental health therapists at a rate much lower than like a nurse practitioner who has the same level of education. And so it makes it really hard for us to kind of keep ourselves afloat. That's, so making some of those changes, getting the rate updates on the legislative level from DHS for Medicaid or Minnesota Care. Those are some really important pieces. Yeah, I would say, those would be the things that, and then the workforce issues we need to, if that happens, then we can pay people a livable wage. Most people get out of grad school with a master's to do psychotherapy and their starting wages in the low 50s. And at best, they might make $65,000 or $70,000 a year with a master's degree. I got out of my master's program, I made less than I made after I got a bachelor's. And so those things, and then you pay it, you have loans, you have the cost of an internship, there are all these, you have to pay for supervision to get your license. So there are all these infrastructure issues and all that, and then people are like, and I go home with nightmares and I can't sleep because I'm worried about this kid, and it's not a career where you don't take it home. And so I think those are things that we're trying to figure out how to work on with our staff at least to support them better.
So what do you suggest for the families that are, just keep calling you back? Have you, the organization that they've contacted, get on multiple waiting lists?
Yes, getting on multiple waiting lists I think is a very prudent thing to do right now. I would also say, we changed our intake procedure to have much more specific. We're not just saying, what's your name and let me put you on the list. We're getting lots of information from folks so that we know if there's something more that needs to be done sooner. I think that's part of it. I think making sure folks know what other resources there are. There's Ramsey County COPE that works with youth. There's all sorts of other things if things kind of get out of hand that folks don't have to be totally on their own. But I wish I had a better answer than that.
I'm just,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming. Just a couple of questions. On the diversion program, I have friends in the sheriff's office and the parole in Ramsey County, and one of the issues they tell me about all the time is there's no place for youth to go, in the system right now. So are you guys full? Are you is it seems like such a hopeful, the diversion piece to me, talking to these guys, is that if we could get them there before they get in the criminal justice system, and there's some hope there. Sometimes when they get too far into the criminal justice system, it's like, what year are they going to be in prison? Because it's just, they can see it. So how's that going? I guess are you full? Are you open? Should I relay back to them, hey, call NYFS if you have a kid and get them into this diversion program?
Yes, tell them to call us. We have, they're busy, and we don't have a wait list for our diversion services right now. We don't have a wait list for our community connection services. Those are programs we can staff. Our staff is incredible. I absolutely agree. I think one of the things that's really unique about NYFS compared to a lot of other services that provide the same sort of thing is that they don't have to have had an interaction with law enforcement to be able to receive services from us. And so they just have to have done something that would merit that. And so we're able to get them, at 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old, when some of this stuff is really starting. And then we provide care that's both accountability, because that's a really important component, but also that wraparound support. What else will help this have a different trajectory, and we're very successful with that. So, but I will say diversion services are absolutely the hardest service for me to get funded as a CEO. Often, the only place that we can get funding is government. It's not something that I have a lot of individual donors that want to give to. It's not something that I think a lot of people think it should be the function of government to cover diversion services, and so that's not where they want to put their dollars. Getting individual grant funding, foundation funding for that has been really hard. It's been a little startling to me. So I would say that's just another thing to know is that it's very hard to get those services funded. And I know that there's some hope to look at that this legislative session, but it is really critical.
Well, that was my next point. Is just I would be certainly watching the legislature, because I know maybe you got to meet the senator on your way out, but you guys should meet so she can look out for you too. But I've been seeing buckets of money and things that, NYFS could probably get a grant from that. They'd fit. So I'd have and we'll watch too. But that was my other point. And then on the community advocate thing, we've had success with that, I think, here. What's the future of that, do you think? And I'll just tell you what I think, and I've talked to this before, this group, but we're sharing somebody, you're supervising. I like that model. You supervise, you hire, because you're in that field. Our chief doesn't necessarily have the mental health training that you do, although she's probably got a lot of training in that. But so I think that model works, but are we headed towards where we have our own, and maybe they're still in the model where you hire and supervise, but we probably could use them full-time pretty soon?
Yeah, and that would just be an issue of funding. If you are all interested in having a contract where you funded one specific position and we place them with you exclusively, we would be happy to do that. I think what I'm thinking about, so that can certainly go forward that way. I would say the other thing I'm thinking about is the specialization, knowing all the resources in the Twin Cities for every single population and being really good at that is challenging. We've had awesome community advocates that have been able to live up to the challenge, but having someone that's specialized to youth, so they come in through the referral source, and then they get someone who knows all the elder services in the region, and they're at all of those tables, and they can get them those resources. I think I think as a vision is a better model. And so having one person would be fine, but if we can have more pooled resources to have a few specialized, and then there's a team, they're not working isolated, there's all of that, and then we have more coverage. I think that's kind of where we want to head at this time. So both are an option, but yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hughes.
I just want to let you guys know, I've been on some of the board meeting phone calls, and I unfortunately don't make all of them, but you guys can't imagine the energy in the room when Angela started, and what the conversations changed. Like, you give a spectacular performance here. Performance isn't the right word, but analysis here, and the amount of work that you've done since this summer is amazing. just, small things, when you were talking about the logo and the colors and what it meant and how the hands work, and it was like, look, it's red. That's my knowledge, right? And the rest of it, putting together the report, these are small things, but they're things that make an organization successful. And I just want to point out for the colleagues how well you're doing with that, and that it's amazing transformation, that it's fun to fund something like that not only looks good on paper, but that actually does good work. And I think we all think that it's work that's highly valuable, so.
Appreciate that. We've got a new brand and a new logo.
Are we
and
bringing back leadership
redoing-
lunch? Is there an opportunity for these guys to sit at a table and write checks that we can do?
Yeah, right now, so we had to really restrict our staffing, so we don't have we used to have 3 development people, we have
Yeah.
1. So we're not sure yet whether it's going to be this spring or next spring, but it will definitely be next spring if it's not this one. But we do have regular tours that we do now, and so you can come to the site, we'll do appetizers and all of that, and then you get a tour from me so I can talk about all the different services on site, and that's been going really well. And then we're going to do some house parties, so that's another opportunity, hopefully some in White Bear, so. Yeah.
Any other questions, council? Well, Ms. Lewis DeMello, thank you very much for your
Yes, thank
report.
you for having
Keep up
me.
all the good work. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, council, we have a resolution before us. What would we like to do?
Just one? Do we have one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move approval.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and the resolution passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 5C, Quarterly Finance and License Bureau Report. Ms. Kinsvater.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm here to bring you the fourth quarter reports for the Finance Department and to the License Bureau. I'm going to start with just discussing some things from our finance report. First and foremost, I want to point out that these are unaudited, so it's as they are today. We're still in the process of making entries for our accounts receivable, accounts payable. We haven't allocated interest to any of the funds, so these amounts will change over the time, but we're in the process. Our audit will be the 3rd week in March, so we're working hard on getting all of that taken care of. As I look at the general fund, I believe we will have a surplus this year, but I don't know what it will be at this time, so not looking closely at that, but I get the feeling that's where we're going to be, some sort of surplus. When we look at this, the enterprise funds, when we look at some of the expenditures, it'll look like they have spent a lot less than when you compare it to the budget. There are some projects that just with the supply chain issues that were approved in 2022, we've had to move the monies. They were hopeful to get the projects done by the end of 2022. And they weren't able to, so that's moving to 2023. So we will see some savings in our expenditures in 2022, but know that that money then just moves to the fund balance. We'll be spending that in 2023. As we look at the general fund, one of the parts where I believe we'll have some surplus is the permit revenues were higher. Our actuals at this point were higher than the revised budget. Some of that is still from that school district project that they were doing, and the other one, in the summer, there was a storm, and so we had quite a few roofing projects, so that brought in unexpected revenue for that. As we look at the sports center, I have 2 specific things on 2 different funds I thought I'd bring up. So in the sports center, we have revenues that were higher than the budgets, and one of the driving force of those extra revenues in the sports center is we added a functionality right at the beginning of COVID, and it was called Live Barn. With Live Barn, it's a company that comes in to the facility. We don't pay anything. They put in cameras, and then people can buy a subscription, and they do that all through Live Barn. They buy a subscription to be able to watch what's ever going on that rink. And when we went through it, they had said we would pay you. They pay us a percentage of what their subscription services are. So we were hoping to make a little bit of money, just knowing that it was COVID, we were trying to keep people apart, but yet people be able to see their kids doing skating lessons or their grandkids in a hockey game. And what's been fascinating, so people sign up. They get a little discount if they use the code that is for the White Bear Lake Sports Center. They get a little discount, which is great. But as I look at it through the year, in 2022, we've received a total of $58,000, which I guess I never dreamed that it would be that much, but that's amazing. And to have this year, to see it be that much in 2022, that the convenience of what it's really helped people in 2020 and 2021 because they couldn't get into the rink and see it, I think that's why we saw a higher percentage of use. But now people, if they're traveling or if the grandparents are in Arizona, but they can pay this money and they can still watch their grandkids and participate. So, I can't guarantee we're going to have that every year, but it's a nice bump to be able to have as revenue as we support the operations there. The second thing I wanted to point out is in the refuse fund. So our recycling market, the recycling market, the contract that we have with the recycling provider is that there is a fee, a charge for processing they have for getting rid of our recycling materials that are collected, and then they sell them on the market. And so the money that they get back from the market is used to pay for the processing fees, and any amounts that are left are paid to the city, which is great when the market is really high. It goes, it's got its cycles. So there have been times in the past where the market is really good and we've been taking in lots of revenue. There have been times when the market dips and then the sales don't cover the cost for processing the recyclables. So at that point, then the city has to pay the processor. As we were going through setting up the budget for 2022, we were coming off a high market, and so we had, for the 2022 budget, we did not add a fee. And we were doing fine through the summer. The market did go down later this fall, so now we're starting to have to pay for processing. The city has been kind of reactive when we've set these fees, so we kind of watch the market and where we're in our budgeting process. When we see we're paying for it, what the council has chosen to do then is to add a small recycling processing fee onto the utility bills, and then we collect, and that starts at the beginning of the next year. And then we'll go through until the market goes up, and then that next year when we set the fee schedule, we take that fee off. So kind of a reactive part. So right now we don't have a fee. We are starting to pay more for our recycling. So just wanted to let you know that's kind of the status of where that is. The final thing I wanted to point out is the License Bureau report is attached at the end. And it was interesting to see that the number of transactions for this year were relatively same, a little bit higher than what we processed last year. But the main part is we are completing our driver's license applications, which those are the transactions that we make the least amount of revenue on. All of the transactions were generally close except for that driver's license. In 2021, we processed 8,990 driver's license. In 2020, we processed 18,787. So, and that's in 2022, sorry about that. So it's been a busy time for us, but the operations are going well. So I'm here, I can answer any questions that anybody may have regarding this information. We look forward to bringing you back the financial information once the audit is done, and that would probably come back to you in May.
Council, questions for Ms. Kinsvater? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Kinsvater, can you refresh my memory how we deal with those situations where we have net income in one program, one division? Let's assume that it's, okay, I'm going to tease this into two parts. One is the things that we thought we were going to do, and then the supply chain broke down, whatever, we couldn't do it. Do those projects automatically roll forward, or is there, how much variation is there in what we then is brought back to us for consideration in the next year's budget? Are they re-budgeted or are they carried forward?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, those are carried forward. In some of those projects, some of the expenditures they were approved as part of the budget, and some of the expenditures were paid for. One I can think of is we ordered an ambulance, and the cot and some of the equipment to go in it, we received. But the actual ambulance,
No wheels.
we didn't get. And so on some of those projects, they aren't coming back to you because you approved them, and then we paid some on them. So that's mostly the case.
And how, that makes sense, and I'm not kvetching about that at all. How about those situations, for example, the cameras in the sports center, where our revenues might be better than what does that just roll into general operating surplus that we then allocate when we formally revise the budgets, or is there a different process that goes on in those situations?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, so on those, when there's a surplus, then it goes into the fund balance of those. Okay. For example, in recent years, we've had large surpluses that have been in the general fund, and the council has chosen to leave some of those monies in the fund balance, but they've also transferred money out for maybe the building, the municipal building fund or the equipment acquisition fund. If there were specific projects that needed funding that didn't have it, that's something that would come back to the council. In the sports center, that money stays in the fund balance. That is one fund that needs some extra revenue, so it's nice to have that revenue to help that fund balance grow.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One compliment, Ms. Kinsvater. Your management in the License Bureau of overtime is impressive for what you guys have experienced. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry to be positive about something.
I'm just surprised. And the other stuff, yeah. We're happy to hear it. Ms. Kinsvater, thank you very much for the detailed report, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, item 6, public hearings of the agenda. We have nothing scheduled. Item 7, unfinished business. We have nothing scheduled. Item 8A, design service proposal for council chambers renovation. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. City Hall was constructed in 1988, and since that time, there have been no renovations of note since construction. Like anything, government has changed over time as it relates to safety, technology, public perception, ADA accessibility requirements, and public meeting attendance. So because of that, many public buildings have seen renovation to modernize and meet the present needs of the public, elected officials, and staff. So tonight you will consider a resolution adopting a proposal from Wold Architects for professional architecture and engineering design services for the proposed renovation of the council chambers of where we're sitting tonight. I want to just go take a deep dive into the staff report here, explaining the reason behind this request tonight. So as I said, City Hall was constructed in 1988 to be open, welcoming, and inviting. Security and safety at that point in time really wasn't something that we thought of for staff and visitors and elected officials 35 years ago. Unfortunately, it is today. Many metro area council chambers generally have dedicated exiting, panic hardware, ballistic barriers at the dais. To date, the only modification that we have made to our dais was the addition of ballistic barriers at the dais. Regarding ADA, the council chambers is ADA accessible from a physical access standpoint as it stands today, but it may not necessarily meet ADA requirements for Title II entities, which is state and local governments. The ADA states that Title II entities are required to communicate effectively with people who have communication disabilities. The goal is to ensure that communication with people with these disabilities is equally as effective as communication with people without disabilities. So we're talking, as I said, it's physically ADA compliant, but it may not necessarily be for vision, hearing, or speech disability. When we talk about transparency and technology, over the years, there have been greater calls for public participation and transparency at all levels of government. That is one area that I believe White Bear Lake has excelled in. So to ensure that we maintain that high level of transparency, I do believe that we should improve the technology setup here in the council chambers for the public. The screens facing the audience are small, and often the format does not allow for proper viewing. Relocating screens closer to the audience and placing an additional screen in the entryway of City Hall will improve the perception of transparency issues as well as ADA requirements. It's a standard for council chambers to have monitors at the dais for elected officials and staff to view presentations. As we rely more on technology and presentations, this really is necessary for our dais. Currently, the depth of our dais would not allow for that. So when we look at funding for potentially completing this project, and I say it's a potential project, because tonight all staff is asking you to do is to pass a resolution which would allow Wold Architects to look at and design the space, and then you would analyze that potential design, and a vote would come back to the City Council to formally move forward with the project or to abandon the project at that time. So we do have ARPA funds still available that was budgeted in 2022 for improvements at the Bel Air Center to relocate the License Bureau and $140,000 in the City Hall office expansion. Both of those projects did not occur, and as we just talked about with the finance report, those funds were carried forward under that as listed as those two projects. I'm recommending that the City Council reallocate those funds for a council chambers renovation. I do not believe that all of those funds would be needed for this project. In addition, in 2015, the Ramsey Washington Suburban Cable Commission allocated funds for each member of the city to make technology improvements to their council chambers. We have about $13,750 left in our original budget of about $160,000. That reimbursement grant program is expiring in March of this year. So staff does anticipate moving forward with those funds regardless of this project or not, but they can only be used for technology upgrades for the public good, for viewing council meetings, et cetera. So as I've said a couple of times, in your packet is a resolution authorizing Wold Architects to move forward for architectural and engineering design services for this proposed project in the dollar amount of $21,000. As I said, after a proposed design would come back to the City Council for a final review and a decision to move forward on a proposed project or to abandon it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Couple comments. This is more for the edification of those in the audience and those that might be watching at home. The goal of this isn't to have a shinier, prettier dais up here or council chambers. These are some very serious logistical and technical improvements that I think are much needed. The ADA compliance is a big one. The safety component is huge. And our technology is low tech, relatively speaking. Ms. Crawford and I had an opportunity to tour a handful of municipalities, comparable municipalities around us, Shoreview, Stillwater, Hugo, and quite frankly, what is projected to the audience, what the audience can see, and what that allows them to do in terms of participating in the work that we do up here is far superior to what we have. I've sat in the audience many, many times, and you have to squint to see what's on the TV, so it makes it more difficult to follow along. So that alone is a pretty big driving force for why I think this is something we should seriously consider. For those on the council that didn't have the benefit of the discussion at the work session, I want to fill you in a little bit. We had a good discussion. It was brought up, hey, are there other things we can be spending this money on, because we have a couple $100,000 earmarked for other renovation projects. And I think that's a fair question. I think, if we can get past phase one and look at the viability of this and what the costs are, I think that should continue to be part of the conversation. Are there better, more efficient uses for the dollars? A couple council members brought that up. So I would envision that being part of this process as we go forward. But at this stage, I think having a design analysis and cost analysis to see what options we have with this footprint is a logical first step. So with that, council, what would we like to do?
Well, we did discuss this at a work session. I think it's not, like you just said, it's not an extravagant thing, and it's a good use of the federal funds and the Comcast funds, or the funds we get for technology. So I support it. I'll move the resolution to go forward with the Wold Architect piece.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second with some discussion.
I have a motion, a second. Further discussion. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I also echo that. I'm wondering, though, 35 years, what's going to be in 15, what's going to be in 10, what's going to be, as long as the duct tape that's gold stays along the front of this edge, I'm good with it. Sorry to go negative again. But, I mean, can there be a few cosmetics? Or should we look at something that is more all-encompassing, à la carte, to give to the councils 4 years from now, 10 years from now? It doesn't have to be done today, but it really does look to say, what's this space do? I know those two rooms have been there. That was the expansion in case we get 1,000 people in here.
Not anymore.
Once, maybe?
It's an office.
Right, I know. But you know what I'm saying? So I just, I don't even know what's behind that door. I don't want to know. But is it, go big down to, okay, we're just going to do this. The technology aspect, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. But I'm just looking at something, is the scope of this large enough, city manager, that we can say, hey, what if we wanted to do this, a la carte it with what the funds we have today?
Yeah. Ms. Crawford, correct me if I'm wrong. This budget isn't just a put a coat of paint there, change some tech. This is kind of a clean sheet renovation of the chambers. So we're talking about moving the dais, walls, moving things like that. I mean, this is, and that's what this first phase is what can we do with the footprint? Including moving walls and doing different things, changing the geometry of the room, what vantage points we're viewing it at. So yeah, that's what this is.
Thank you.
Councilmember Walsh.
Just as you're going forward, and just for the record, one of the advantages we have in this room is it's not a huge room. I mean, I've done some VLAMO meetings over at Vadnais Heights, and you feel like you're way up on a spaceship, and the public's way down there, and there's some, I like this, we do a lot of, we do a lot of back and forth here. It's very easy to do. So I'd say, maybe the room, it's impossible not to continue doing that, but let's make sure we continue to do that and not build ourselves some kind of monstrosity where we're away from the public. And then just a reminder, these chairs are really new, so we don't need new chairs. And there's no reason that chairs couldn't work with any new dais, but don't put chairs in the thing. We just got these, and they're nice.
Councilmember Edberg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I support the use of the technology dollars. That makes sense. Completely on board. And I'll support the study to look at design options. I really would value what are those alternative uses? And I'll leave it there. I'm trusting we'll get that.
Councilmember Hughes.
I don't really want to do it, so I'm going to vote against it. We just spent, a huge tax increase and $17 million in a building next door, and I'm not excited. I've only been here for a year, and yeah, this probably isn't my favorite room anywhere in any planet, but it gets the job done, and I just feel like I just approved a huge budget for something that is necessary. And I see some other projects coming down the pike that I guess I would put in front of new carpet and paint. So I'm being facetious, but I got other priorities other than this room. Like speaking into the mic. Like technology. So I guess I would say, I understand we have some technology money, and maybe that should go toward education meetings for me to use the mic. But the rest of the dollars in terms of outfitting this room, I'm not very excited by. So, yeah, that's it.
No, that's a fair point. We all want to keep an eye on the budget. I do want to ask Ms. Crawford if maybe you could explain a little bit about the funding of this, maybe expound on that. My understanding is that this isn't just money that we can just put into the pool. They're relatively restricted, or we have some strings attached to how we can spend it pursuant to the ARPA funding, and maybe you can separate fact from fiction and clarify that a little bit.
Sure. Mayor, members of the council, we are required to use ARPA funds within, I believe it's by 25. I wish Ms. Kinswater was still here. I believe it's by the end of 25. This is a project that would be a one-time expenditure rather than something that would go forward in a tax levy. So I'm trying to look at projects, priority projects that may not affect the budget going forward, looking at ARPA funds. So there is certainly a list, and we will evaluate that. I do believe it's valuable to move forward with just the study at this point, and we'll see where that goes. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
I have, the motion carries and the resolution passes by a vote of 3-2. Moving on to item 9, discussion, 9A, downtown lighting. And I believe Mr. Coppy is taking this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with a couple of slides just to kind of focus in on what the topic of the discussion is. If you want to go to the first slide there. So this is a picture of 4th Street looking east. This is a newer area that I'm going to run you through a few pictures, and then we'll get to a map, and then I'll kind of explain where some of the history is and lies in the downtown area. But this is the newer lighting system that's on 4th Street that was done in the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006 timeframe. You can see how bright it is, how that ambiance looks for our downtown, and that's what we have pictured for this upcoming project in 24 or 25. You want to go to the next slide? So this is the kind of the heart of the discussion tonight. This is 3rd Street. So you can see the old carriage light system that was originally installed in the mid-1970s. So a rather old system, and you can see kind of just the technology, the brightness of them. They are wood pole systems, so a lot of damage has occurred over the years. Go to the next slide. I'm going to do 2 more pictures here. You can see a number of the lights are still standing, but the lights are out. We've attempted a number of times to get a lot of these to work. We're finding out that they're underground wiring issues. Again, looking at the age, back in those days. And actually just until, maybe in the last 10 years, we've really focused on putting wire in conduit. That would allow us to just pull new wires if something failed. In these older areas, it was direct bury wires. Rodents have gotten to them, just the coatings have deteriorated, the wires have shorted out. So kind of a, without digging up the sidewalks and our other infrastructure, it's difficult to get those repaired. Go to the next slide. It's a little bit hard to make out, but if you look at the corner of the building there, there's a lot of these that have failed, that the tops of the poles have rotted enough that we've actually had to take the fixtures down. We didn't take the poles down in a number of cases, as I'll allude to when I get to the map, but just to allow us to continue to put banners up and the hanging baskets and things like that we do during the summer months. So that's some of the reasoning why we left those out. But just so you have some context as we get into the discussion. So if you go to the next slide. So this is a map that was in each of your handouts. What we tried to do is take our inventory. We went out a couple of evenings, my staff and I, and we tried to inventory what we had out there. So I believe you each have a copy of the map that was provided to you in your packet, but really the area, I'll call it in the circles and triangles up there, are the newer metal or fiberglass light pole systems, newer fixtures that were installed. Like banding was installed in the 1990s. The blue circles were installed in that 2005 project. That was the first phase of downtown. And the lights that are shown in the squares, we narrowed it down into 3 different, I'll call it conditions. The first being the square with kind of the yellow highlight. Those are the lights that are currently working. In parentheses, that's the number that we found. So we currently have 34 of those that are originally installed that are working. The ones that are have the black outline around them, those are ones that are currently out. The fixtures are still up. Those are the ones that we really tried to focus over the last year or so to get working with our electrician. That's been doing work in downtown for quite some time. And then the ones with the X's have either been completely removed or the fixtures removed and the poles are just standing, like that last example that the fixtures are gone, they're basically non-functioning. So if you kind of do the math, we had 81 lights total in this area that were original, the wood pole carriage lights. So we have 34 that are in working order, 33 have been removed or the fixtures removed, and we have 14 that are still standing with the fixtures on them that we believe are underground wiring issues. Try to resolve some of them this fall, and our electrician was just unable to get them diagnosed and find out where that fault is to easily fix them. So that's kind of the general system. All of this downtown area runs off of photocells, so they run basically dusk to dawn. So obviously they're more, I'll call it the deficiency is seen more in the wintertime when we have less light. Obviously during the summertime when it's light later, it's obviously less noticeable, but during the wintertime, as I showed in the pictures, it's very noticeable. So what staff did was, based on this topic, is to kind of look at what some of the options might be. One of the kind of the first things that we looked at was what's an easy solution for, because obviously digging up the sidewalks, replacing that, putting new wires in is going to be expensive, as I'll get to. But one thing that we did look at was, could we put solar lights down there? In talking with a couple of manufacturers, our electrician had a little bit of hesitancy there, being the old wood poles are, again, 1970s, 40 years old. A lot of them have failed because they have rotted. The fixtures were taken down because the tops of the poles were rotted and couldn't support the even the existing fixtures. Now a solar light requires batteries to be put up there, which are heavier. Some of the fixtures, the LED fixtures, are actually heavier because of the ballast that they need and the electronics that they need. So there's some concern that the poles could actually support that. So at this point, until, depending on council direction, we would have to come in, have somebody come in, or we'd have to go up on every one of those poles to take a look at the exact condition of them. The next option that we looked at, the next two options are kind of go hand in hand. One of the concerns is that obviously we have lights that don't work. So how do we get those going? And the second one is we have lights that are, as the picture showed, on but very dim. So kind of two separate issues. So the first one is the lights that are out. So we have 14 of them that are still standing, but then we have, again, 33 that have been removed and or are just standing up there with poles. So how do we get those going? So based on some of our experience, so we did a few over the last couple of years where we added I'll call it just a light at the end of a cul-de-sac, a couple of areas where we noticed we weren't meeting our own policy. So we had Excel go in, put those lights in, and they cost about $6,000 to $7,000 a piece. So that's per light. That doesn't include, those are typically fairly easy ones to put in. They set a light pole, they put the fixture on, and typically an overhead wire, or they can directional drill a underground wire rather easily to light that light. Looking in the downtown area, most of that, we can't go overhead. We'd have to go under or replace the existing underground wiring, so we'd have to cut channel in the sidewalk, put new wire conduits in, get that put to those locations where the poles are, or either remove the poles, put new either, what we would look at doing is more of a simple light, knowing that we're coming in with a project in a couple of years, but you'd have to use a fiberglass or aluminum pole that you would do as a direct bury versus some of our decorative lighting has poured concrete bases. We wouldn't go to that level. We would do something more inexpensive. Probably just fix those trenches with blacktop versus repouring concrete, save costs for the interim. But we're still looking probably at $5,000 to $10,000 per fixture, depending on what it would take to get. Again, we're diagnosing an underground system. A lot of it, we don't even know where the wire's at. The records are lost from the 1970s. We have traced and found a lot of them, but there's still a lot of unknown. So even just looking at those, say the 14 fixtures that are, currently up, unlit, $5,000 to $10,000, we're looking at $70,000 to $140,000. Not considering the other 33 that we've taken down or taken fixtures off of. Obviously the cost goes up from there. Going on to the next topic of relamping or replacing fixture heads on the ones that we know work. They're dim, but we know they're getting power, they're lighting. We're probably looking at with purchasing fixtures or lamps and having an electrician install them. They'd have to bring a truck out and install those. Probably looking at $500 to $1,000 per fixture. So again, just a relamp, and again, 34 fixtures out there. We're looking at $17,000 to $34,000 in that ballpark. We haven't gotten quotes and things like that at this point. And then obviously there's a do nothing as we have a project coming up in the 24-25 time frame. Not knowing which area is going to get hit when, but we anticipate it, or hopefully starting some of it in 2024. Just touching on budget a little bit on what we spend down there, what we kind of have budgeted in the streetlight budget. In 2023, we've done this for a few years just to do those infill lights like I'd mentioned. We have $13,000 or $6,500 per light. So we estimate that each year that we're going to get some citizen requests, things that we don't notice or that we need to get kind of more up to speed. We have $13,000 there. And then we actually spend or have budgeted $9,700 for electrical repairs and fixture repairs, things like that, just to keep. And again, we keep losing some every year, but that's what we have for downtown lighting repairs and equipment and stuff each year. So with that, I'll turn it back over to council for any questions they have of me.
Thank you, Mr. Copy. I know there was folks that wanted to speak on this, so I will open it up for a public hearing if anybody does want to speak to address this issue. Please step forward, Ms. Schoonover.
Hi, I'm Kim Schoonover, and I own, hi, by the way, it's nice to finally see who you are. I appreciate your communication. Anyway, I am a building owner as well as a business owner on 3rd Street. One of the things I want to point out.
Can you say your address for the record?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
It's 2183 3rd Street. One of the things I want to point out is the photos. Can you go back to the photo on 3rd Street? That one. So I want to point out that it isn't even as light as that. My building is the first one on the right here, and I have all these lights there. I have Christmas lights. I have everything out there. The lights on top of the building across the street also has Christmas lights. Imagine when those go off, how dark our street is. I mean, it's really dark. I understand budgets. We've talked, I've talked with you. I've communicated a lot. I appreciate the communication. My concern is, I understand plans, I understand surveys, but there are lights that are going out all the time, and they're not being replaced. And so now there's, again, one right outside my building. There's 2 more down the street that aren't working. And as we've discussed, once they're out, they're out. There's no replacement. So I'm just asking for a temporary something. I mean, truthfully, I've been tempted to climb up the light poles and put spotlights on there just to get something. I see families with little kids walking from the square down the street at night, and it is so dark. It is not welcoming. You know, we've all spent money on our businesses to try to make them welcoming, and this is not welcoming by any means. So it's very frustrating. I just, hope that we can find some type of temporary fix. I, appreciate the different things that you're talking about. I don't know what the answer is, but it's just very frustrating. So that's all. But thank you for bringing it this far.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, let me offer a couple comments to get the conversation started. So, to me, this is a pretty straightforward return on investment analysis, knowing that whatever we put in is going to get ripped up in a couple of years. If you look at it purely from a dollars and cents standpoint, it makes no sense because it's a lost cost. So in my mind, $140,000 to replace all of them doesn't make a lot of sense. I wonder if there, as Ms. Schoonover suggested, is a temporary measure, the most cost-effective measure to replace some, or ones that objectively are exceptionally dark that don't, for example, have ambient lighting from other areas. If you look at your diagram, there are 4 that are no longer there at Banning and 4th. Well, Banning was relined with, at Banning and 4th. That whole intersection now has lights from Banning. So those 4, why would we replace those? There are new lights that have come in behind it. But are there other lights that maybe we can, if there's power going to it and it's dim, simply replacing the fixture? If you look at it purely from an aesthetic standpoint, I mean, I'll just be candid, it's embarrassing. I just drove it before the council meeting, and there is a high level of lights that are not working, and if you know to look for it, it's very noticeable. I will note that I asked Ms. Crawford to reach out to the police department prior to this meeting to get their perspective from a public safety standpoint. And I'll paraphrase because it wasn't an in-depth analysis, but they did a little bit of quick statistical analysis of crime rates. They don't have a concern. There's nothing to suggest that in the areas where the lighting is out that has an increased number of reported crimes, anything to that effect. I think it really comes down to, a quality of life and a pride in our downtown area. Again, I'll say the dollars and cents on paper don't make sense knowing that we're going to rip it up. I think it's worth mentioning that that's our plan for 24-25. We haven't approved that yet, and plans get pushed out. So how long do we go on having lights that are at a state of disrepair? So I guess my food for thought for the council to consider is there some fix that we can make? Replace some of the fixtures, find the exceptionally bad or dark areas, and spend, quite frankly, as little money as possible, but to basically put a Band-Aid on this for 18 months to 2 years, and give us some relief in the meantime. So that's what I would pose to the council. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Schoonover, for appearing. It's not that easy to do, and to be persistent. It is almost, I don't want to say blight, my vocabulary isn't large enough to say, but that's the tiptoe that we're looking at. And you can argue all day, but I'll look at 3rd, look at the size of 4th, look at the size of 3rd. 3rd's much larger. More businesses on that street, why aren't we serving them? I definitely think that if there is a way for Mr. Kauppi's team to say, and I think the business owners are reasonable to say, hey, yeah, there's an every other and every 3rd. What accomplishes it? And I don't know, but I think that would be reasonable to say, hey, every other, every 3rd type aspect to do. That it's certainly not all of them. That's not reasonable. But there's got to be a 4th way. do nothing is not acceptable.
Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. A question, Mr. Copy. So we talk about the street reconstruction project, which will solve the problem, 24 or 25. Can we prioritize? I guess is there a way to prioritize the street project based on the lights, or is that not a factor you'd be comfortable prioritizing? Like, what goes first? Can we do that? Or do other things go into effect, like, better, more important things?
Mayor, members of the council, as far as, I'll call it putting a street light system in ahead of the project, is that what you're
That's
asking?
not what I meant. I mean, just say, like, I guess maybe it doesn't make sense. I've looked at 3rd Street. Like, if we think 3rd Street is the problem, then can we do 3rd Street first? And you say 24 or 25. I say, all right, 24 is next year. I could say, all right, we'll wait and not do the expenditure until 24. But when you say 25, now we're out 2 years. I'll say, well, we control that. When we do that is in our control, unless there are other factors that say, no, you got to use a different model for which street goes first. That's my question.
Mayor, members of the council, understanding Councilmember Walsh's question, how we kind of envisioned the project occurring. Obviously, we have a lot of, as we alluded to in the memo, we have a lot of activities, things like that with Market Fest, things like that going on. We'll be accepting the request for proposals next Friday from consultants to start the study. We anticipate it being done late 23 by January 24. We'd move forward, or hopefully we could come to a consensus what that design looks like. And obviously, we have a lot of different factors that play into it. One of the things that, from a staging standpoint, that we envisioned is in 2020, to realistically go tear this whole area up. We also have some of the parking lots that fall just outside of this area. Obviously, the Armory parking lot. We have the Ace Hardware parking lot that also fall within the study. So our vision at first is to potentially in 2024 go in and do those parking lots late season to avoid Market Fest and some of the other activities that we have going on. And then that way we have a place for those, some of those activities or parking that we need for downtown to move into the parking lots in the 25 when we might actually do the streets. That way you're not, we do the streets first and then the parking lots, you're driving all this equipment and doing all this over brand new streets. So we want to kind of work in and come out. So that's the most logical from a staging standpoint.
Okay, that's a great answer. I mean, then I'd say, yes, there is a better priority for staging and when you do it. So knowing that, I mean, I think I'm where you are, Mayor. I think, spend some money. And it sounds like you have some money budgeted, a little bit of money budgeted for the activity. So if you can count that towards it, I don't know, every third of it, somebody smart could figure out if we could spend some money. I don't know what that amount is. It's not 140,000. It's not 100,000, but it's 500 to 1,000 a light. I heard to do some replacement of ones that go out that maybe still have some electricity getting there. If we could, I would say spend some money, but not a lot, and then we just have to gut it out and wait until we get the whole thing done. It'll be awesome when it's all done. There's no disagreement that it all needs to get done right, but it's just a matter of how do we spend in the interim. I'm not compelled to do that.
And I am glad you asked the question, because to me there's a different analysis between what we're talking about putting new lights up for 2023 and it's all going to get ripped up in 2024. That's not what we're talking about. It's really lights. Whatever we spend today is for 23, 24. We're getting a couple of years out of it, and that to me is pretty significant. Councilmember Hughes.
I think it's 23, 24, and 25.
20, yeah.
Mayor, members of the
I'm
council.
just saying, you're talking about finishing out this winter, because that's what we're talking about, winter, right? I mean, nobody's the lights aren't a problem in July, it's winter. So this winter, which you're finishing out, next winter, and the following winter, before you rip it up the next time, because it's going to be after the parking lot.
Correct. So we would anticipate the streets being torn up spring of 2025.
So whatever we do or don't do is the case for this winter and 2 more, basically.
Well, we would not be able to get any work done yet this winter, just because a lot of the work we have to do is underground, under 4 feet of snow right now. So we're not going to be able to do much of any work. Possibly, if council direct staff, we could do or look into doing fixture replacements on some of the existing lights, maybe to add some additional, I'll call it brightness down there. But again, as getting them and getting an electrician in, being able to source that. Fixtures have been, again, that lead time on getting some of this stuff, so some of that might play into it. So we'll have to kind of work with our vendors and our electrician to see what can be done and how quickly it can be done. But I would anticipate by spring we could have existing fixtures, some of them relamped if that's the direction council sends us. And then as far as actually trying to figure out some of the ones that we have wiring issues and may have to run new wires, that's going to be a summer of 23 work.
Mr. Copley, can you paint a picture for me with, so some of them, 500 to 1,000, that seems pretty reasonable. And we have ones that are dim. Is that going to make an improvement? Are we talking about, substantially brighter lighting and that alone?
Yeah, I'll have Tracy go back to some of the pictures. So stop there. That's 3rd Street with the existing dim lighting, okay? Now, if you go back one more slide, if you look down there, that's 4th Street. Those are dual head fixtures. Those wood poles cannot support that, so it's not going to be quite that bright. But that's kind of the level of brightness that we, new LED lighting, bulbs and those kind of fixtures. So not quite that bright, but it should make a significant improvement.
And that first phase is, the analysis is one, is there enough structural integrity to hold whatever that new fixture is? I mean, that's why we haven't replaced bulbs or replaced the ones that have gone out, right? Some of the poles are at a state of disrepair. So we have to look at that first. There are going to be some where the only option is the 5,000 to 10,000 route. It's not just a matter of putting a new fixture on, but there are some
Correct.
Where we can do that. It's got juice running to it, and the wood is still has enough integrity to put a new one on. So it seems to me that is our cheapest first phase, and we should look at that first. And then, and I don't know, maybe there are really bad places that it can justify the $5,000 to $10,000. I forget which one it was in driving by this evening, just directly across from the square, for example. That just seemed visibly darker than anywhere else because it had multiple lights out in a row. There wasn't enough ambient lighting. So I think if we can get granular about it, let's just be realistic. Okay, you can look at it and say, this is really dark. This area needs a little more light. And then other areas where you say, well, there's newer fixtures in there. And that's kind of how I envision doing this, again, as cheaply as possible. But a couple of years, it's a quality of life thing. And I think we can do better than what we're doing right now.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Jones.
So even if Mr. Copley, just looking at the 4 poles where there wood lights out, those are the ones on 3rd Street between Clark and Banning. Right there. Yeah. So those 4 poles, and then we have 2 operating aluminum ones across by Premier Bank.
So, Mayor, members of the council, the ones by Premier Bank were privately installed. We somehow or another ended up with electrical service to them, but they were privately installed as part of the bank project some time ago. But we see, I've seen the obvious benefit to our street, and we've done our best to keep those lit as well.
But if you had direction from at least one council member, I would say, are those 4 poles, they have wiring issues? Or is this what we're talking about, the 500 to 1,000?
Those 4 circles around Premier Bank.
I'm sorry, the 4 poles that according, they're wood light out. 14 of them? Mm-hmm. I'm just talking about the 4 along.
Third.
Ones with the X's are gone.
Correct.
Those don't
Understood.
exist.
We have 4.
Yep. 2, 3, 4, correct. Yep, those 4 black squared boxes are ones that are standing like that.
Like that, like
have,
right, and 2 in front of the Getty.
Yep, that we believe have some underground wiring issues that we'd have to dig up the sidewalk, put new wiring in, put new poles. By the time we get to all that, we'd put new poles, new fixtures, and that's that more $5,000 to $10,000.
So Okay. Well, that almost puts it in the X category.
That had been past practice. To,
Right.
you know, had we continued down the path that, you know, has been going on for 20-some years,
So
we
then
would have just removed them.
The alternate is, can we, all right, let's talk about like the fixture in front of Ms. Schoonover's building and across the street from it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on that neighborhood between Washington and Banning. Is there different lighting that could be put onto that? And is that what you're talking with? What was that price again?
That range is probably $500 to $1,000, assuming that the pole has enough integrity to hold the fixture. Again, we evaluate each one as we go. That, you know, we'd have to go up there, make sure the tops, like I showed in one of the pictures, there's poles that are up there that we've taken the fixtures off because the top is so rotted that the fixture was falling off the pole.
Not one of these that are marked wood working light. You don't know if those are rotting up there or not.
No. We've not done a structural evaluation of whether they're working or not. There could be lights that are lit, working.
But if you went to do something.
Yep. It could be rotted up there, just, it's one strong wind away from coming loose.
But we got
don't know
power.
that. But it's got power.
Can we,
Go ahead.
I'm kind of following up. Can we start this off with, can we go after those 34 wood working lights and change them? And
Yeah.
then see what happens?
At
And
least-
what you can fix, you fix. What you can't, you can't. You can throw a 2x4 next to it, level it out, throw a light up there, great.
Yep.
I mean, that sounds
Good.
like, that
If there's
sounds like,
10 lights and 5 of them could be,
well, it says there's 34 of them, so can't we just switch them all out? It's $34,000. I mean, it's a lot of money, so I guess I'm saying, right. I mean, perfect world here, all of them can be changed, all of them can be flipped out, that's $34,000. And look, Kevin already said yes, he's raising his hand.
And I'm smiling, too.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. There are lots of nuances in there, and
Yes.
I'll just, and it's hard to pick winners and losers, who should get it and who's not. But for example, across from Premier Bank, those 2 private light poles, I drove by a couple hours ago, they're really bright. They're like brighter than anything downtown White Bear. So as you're going through, the one across the street might not need to justify it because there is so much lighting. I mean, I think I trust city staff to go through and say, okay, this clearly is really bad, this needs a fix. This one clearly is just fine, we don't need to do that. And that's how I envision it. So it's not $34,000, it's maybe there's a dozen of these things that we can start with as a starting point and then see what it looks like. It doesn't have to be a, outright approval today. We can kind of do it, because it sounds like that can happen in relative short order. If there's power going to it, to put a new fixture up there, just take a step back and say, how'd we do? Is it an improvement or not? Do we need to go to another level? So.
we do every other.
To what?
Can you do every other? Like, you
Well,
don't
that's
need
what I
to
mean.
do every one,
I
right?
mean, you gotta look at each one, in the context of the surrounding area and what other lighting is available. So I would support that. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Kaupe, these are all examples to me of deferred maintenance gone bad. Is that an unrealistic assessment?
If I look back in my crystal ball, yes. Not knowing what past thought process was with my predecessors, past councils, et cetera. Obviously, you can see, ones that I look at and like the ones on Clark, they were all taken out. They were hit so many times. The decision was made by people before us to take them out.
Okay. That's fine. So actually, the next question is the one I want. Are these the only examples of deferred public infrastructure, deferred maintenance in the city of White Bear Lake?
Mayor, members of the council, no.
Oh, really? I'm surprised. I'm shocked. So, all right, here's the deal.
Being me doesn't suit you.
It doesn't. I'm trying, and it's not working. All right, big picture. This item is here because it's an issue. I agree it's an issue. I don't know why it's here unless it's because there was a series of complaints. All right, fine. So what about the rest of the city? What about the years that the South Side has been disinvested? And nobody's talking about that. When we talk about wanting to do something at Ian Bel Air, we have folks, members of the council, who say, not yet, not now, too much to swallow. So we haven't, but when it comes to some other place, like in downtown, we have a different level of concern. Now, I'm not opposed to figuring out what we can do with this, and I think the council is having a reasonable conversation about it doesn't make any sense to do this in the short term because we're going to be replacing them, and it's putting good money after not so good money, all right? I think we're having a reasonable conversation. I just want to hold up that the downtown area, particularly the part of downtown east of 61, is not the only business district in the city of White Bear Lake. It's not the only place where we have deferred maintenance. It's not the only place where, Mr. Walsh, the White Bear Way is actually, we make do, all right? That, because we like and glory in our low taxes, and that's the conversation we have every year when we have discussion about property taxes. And I'll hark back to the comment I made a couple meetings ago about there is a connection here about what are the things that we prioritize and what do we take on. Now, I don't object to the fact that this is here. It's reasonable. What I'm objecting to is how does it get here and how do we get the rest of the city to also benefit from this kind of a conversation in a more holistic and bigger way? Because we don't seem to be able to get to that conversation very easily. I'd like to know what the rules of the road are going to be in this council about where we make our public investments. I would say, for example, it's probably not applicable. I would say that redoing our streetlights would be a much higher priority than redoing the council chambers. That's probably not an option because I don't think the ARPA rules permit us to make that choice. Maybe with some of our, if Ms. Kinsvater was correct that we're going to have a surplus of operating funds, maybe there's a place of reallocating. Maybe there are some other places that we can look and squinty and do some other stuff as opposed to whatever. But it annoys me, and it probably is obvious. So the one request I would make is that if we're going to do something like this, and if we're going to be making plans, let's look at, and particularly when we do it in a more permanent way, I really would like us to be looking at emerging technologies that allow us to be super energy efficient, that we look at the mechanisms for saving energy costs, that we look at whatever kinds of new options that are out there that might cost more initially, that buy down our cost over time. So I'm planting those seeds now, and I'm asking council members to just remember that lights out in downtown ain't our only place in town that we need to spend some money.
No, I appreciate that. Those are fair comments. I do want to offer a response. So, I can only speak from my tenure, which has been a year old now, and I'm sure there's lots of deferred maintenance all over the city, and I hear what you're saying. It seems like the downtown gets all the attention. I know this. Two things. One, this complaint was brought before us. I think it's reasonable. I think it's something we should consider. So that's what's before us. It's a squeaky wheel gets the grease. Two, if there's other deferred maintenance, regardless of what geographic area in the city it is, if it deserves the same attention, if there's a need for it, there's complaints, and there's a good faith basis to do it, then let's bring it. I don't want to ignore that. But this one's here now. It is the most high traffic area of the city in terms of population. And so those are all fair comments, and my pledge to you is, going forward, I mean, bring those issues before the council. I'm all for it. I'm not saying we only spend money here but not there. But this one's here before us right now. I think there's a lot of merit to it, and I think we should seriously consider it. I don't know what to, go ahead.
So, intellectual volleyball, keep the idea alive, no spiking loud, all right?
Your shot, go for it.
No, I don't want to take a shot.
No, you know what I mean, hit.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. So,
Sir, thank you, yeah.
from the standpoint of, okay, I could picture making an investment that would address some portions of this in some kind of measured way. What kind of dollar? How many zeros are we talking? What's in your mind, or do we need to send that back to Mr. Kauppi? Is that the kind of direction that you're looking for? Because I could picture 5 digits and maybe the first number is 1, or it's not 7, 8, or 9, but maybe there's something in there, and I'm open to listening to that.
Okay.
What's in your mind? What are you
So
thinking about?
here's what's in my head. Knowing that these are all sunk costs,
Yep.
you got to look at, well, what's the value that you place on remedying some blight, something that aesthetically is terrible. The police department weighed in, they don't think it's a public safety issue. Nobody knows that for sure. We just know that if it's darker, it's potentially less safe, right? Here's what I have in my head. I would really like to see how far we can stretch about 30 grand and just see where that can get us. Maybe as high as 40. I don't want to spend 60, 70, $80,000, but it seems like 30 at the outer limit, 40 to put a Band-Aid on this for at least 2 years of a high traffic downtown area relative to the city's broader budget. That doesn't seem like a complete waste of money. I think that's money well spent for 2+ years worth of value of having proper lighting downtown White Bear. The 140 to me is laughable. That's not going to happen. So that's what I have in my head. But I'm one guy that doesn't vote. So
Your vote's cheap.
I don't know what others have in their head. But I think we can spend a fair amount of money to try and remedy this.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Jones.
Sure, with that dollar amount. I would support that. And to me, this is like,
30 to 40.
we put ourselves here.
Right.
We're supposed to have streetlights. We don't. They're not working. If this was anywhere in the city, we'd be fixing it. If this was at the corner of Ronald and X, we'd be replacing it. Yes or no?
No, we'd be making do.
If it did not work, that's not true. I've had 2 streetlights that have failed that have been replaced.
But we're not
in my ward.
in those situations, we're not having to replace.
I understand that, but
It's
I'm
not the same technology, it's not the same setting.
I get it, but at the same time, it's our responsibility to provide it, and we have not done so. So there's a price to pay for that. That price should not be any more than that. And I hope that it's reasonable, that there's enough on Second and Third to shed some light. And I am a big believer in that perception. Perception is reality, folks. Perception is reality. So if it looks dingy, it is.
And I'll underscore it again, but for a total remodel and reconstruction of the downtown area, I'd be sitting here saying, shame on us. I don't care what it costs. Let's figure out our lighting situation in downtown White Bear. We would be having that conversation. So we recognize the value in doing this properly. It's just a matter of where's that line. But we are going to have this reconstruction project, so we got to be good stewards of the tax dollars. And I think that's a relatively modest amount to spend to put a Band-Aid on this. That's where my head is.
So is staff looking, Mr. Mayor, to say, hey, can we find enough? And is there, okay, sprinkled, there's 3, 4 that'll work here on what we, I believe, have come to a consensus as a council? The polls got to support something, and if they don't, no. It's just a flat, hard no. We're not digging up concrete. It's replacement of those fixtures that can be replaced.
Yeah, this is what I think that the ask would be, and what a resolution or action from the council would be is, let's first identify what poles have power and structural integrity. How many is it, and what's it going to cost to fix it, right? And
Where are they?
And where are they? And then we can look at and some feedback from staff about, well, this one has juice going to it, it has structural integrity, but it doesn't need it because there's ambient lighting from here or there, right? So it's let's do that step one because we know that's the most economical. And maybe it's $8,000. I don't know. Great. Well, let's do it for $8,000. I mean, that's step one. I don't think we should be just writing a blank check here saying go and spend $40,000, but that's a logical first step, which you correct me if I'm wrong, we can probably do in relative short order, and let's see what that looks like. And if you tell us, well, we only have 2 of those and it's not really going to move the needle, then the next step is identifying areas where we have to do ground up, run a new conduit, and how many are in a need based against this kind of ballpark budget that we're setting, and that would be the next phase. But let's, we all agree we want to spend as little money as possible to try and make this look well enough that we can be proud of it for the short period of time until we rip it all up and throw it away. So, is that kind of what the council would support? Councilmember Edberg.
So, yeah, what I would ask, just in the sense of, in a spirit of honest accounting, that when we get here's the cost to do it, and then what's the sunk cost? What's the, what's the salvage value, if any? What's the, I'd like to know what the actual cost, not just the first cost, but the whole thing from a financial analysis looks like. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's instructive to us about how we spend and account for those resources.
Let me just ask the question of Mr. Coppy, just, is there any repurposing of any new fixture that we put down there, or is it all just going to get bulldozed and throw away?
My guess would be is that it would be throwaway, just from the standpoint of, as you could see from those previous pictures, they're much more robust fixtures that we're putting on top of the metal poles, double fixtures that give out more light. These are likely going to be smaller, lighter single bulb fixtures that will replace. Obviously won't give off the same light. Not to say we couldn't take them down and maybe use them somewhere. Or,
can we put them in a park somewhere? I mean,
yeah.
That was, I don't know if you knew.
Maybe over the dog beach.
And a lot of the costs that we're looking at really is labor too, hiring the electricians to do the work, to run the wires, to do that. A lot of it is the actual physical labor piece of it.
And we know that's a sunk cost, right? To run a conduit, that's done in 24 to 36 months. We're just going to dig it all up and have to run new conduits. Okay. So it really is just the actual material cost of the fixtures. Can it be repurposed? Maybe not. I'm just be thinking about that. Is there a 15-year-old lamp at a park that, hey, this will work, let's reuse it?
Yep.
Something, I don't know if it gets us home from a financial standpoint, but maybe we recoup some money. Councilmember Hughes.
After teasing Mr. Edberg, I would like to say, I haven't seen anything come up that we could spend money on in County E in my short period of time here, but I look forward to doing it. Mm-hmm. I do. I don't envision myself sitting here and not trying to figure out a way to make it what you envision it, but to work on what that community group comes up with and what the localities come up with. So I don't necessarily see it all as a zero-sum game, but I do recognize when money is being spent in one area and not in another.
I just want to echo something. Don't take it as a shot. It's not. I'm just hitting the ball back. You've said elections have consequences. You're right. That doesn't mean bad. There's new blood on here, and I think there's an appetite to do some things on the south side. So do we need anything formal? Is that enough that you have, Mr. Coppy, to go report back sooner rather than later to see what can be done at that phase one and give us some numbers and see what we can do?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I just wanted to say one thing, and I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I do have a suggestion that would not be very expensive, but I don't know if it can be done. You see a lot of downtown areas that are very quaint like ours that string the lights across the streets. And so is it appropriate? Is it legal? Are they high enough that we can just string lights across the street, it would bring enough light there and would cost nowhere near the amount of money that you're talking about. But I don't know if that's even a possibility, if the posts are high enough to do it, or you can make it higher, you know, to string them. But just a suggestion.
No, I appreciate
So-
that. Mr. Coffey.
Mayor, members of the council, we have that same concern with the structural integrity of the wood poles. That is something that, as we go with the downtown study, there's been some ideas like that that have been thrown about to do things like that. They take pretty robust cables, run between the different poles to support the, I'll call it, it's not just running, you know, Christmas tree lights like we buy from, you know, Target. They're very robust cables, industrial grade wiring, things like that. Definitely something that we would look at, I'll call it above and beyond, to add that ambiance to the downtown area as a whole, but the wood poles themselves can't support it.
Okay. How much of a heavy lift would it be to say we're going to put 4 new pylons in the ground structurally with enough structural integrity to support a cable? I mean, can we price this out with relative ease to see what that would look like? I'd be curious to know, because at the end of the day, we want to spend as little money as possible and light the thing. If you say that's 10 grand to cover most of 3rd Street, it doesn't matter to me. If it's going to look good and it's going to light the street, it's going to be the most cost effective. Why not consider it?
Mayor, members of the council, just gut reaction. You're looking at kind of that $5,000 to $10,000 per pole to, you know, that's structurally sound enough to be able to support that cabling system. We'd have to hire a true structural engineer to go and do that analysis. So just even to run it in a small location, you might be in that $40,000 to $50,000 range just for a small area.
That's helpful. To the layperson, it seems like, well, that's a cheap solution, but it sounds like it might not be. Thank you.
Just quickly, in addition to that, because of the structure or the integrity of those poles, that could cause some potential ramifications, safety ramifications versus working on individual poles. But I believe that that is something that can certainly be looked at in the mobility and parking study.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9B, sidewalk seating discussion. I believe Ms. Schimick is taking this?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As you may recall, last spring, we brought an item to you that was kind of as a result of a temporary and interim process we allowed during COVID to allow for outdoor seating on the sidewalks, for expanded restaurant seating when they were limited due to COVID restrictions. Since that time, thank you. Since that time, we have had restaurants approach us again who would like to continue that process. We brought this item before you for discussion last spring, and the direction we got from council was, yes, we would like to see a codified process that offers transparency, fairness, and consistency in its application, that there was not interest in using public parking to expand outdoor seating, and to examine what happens in other communities and bring that back to council with recommendations for an ordinance that would establish a process. In that time, we have done that. We looked at a number of different cities and what they do. Most of them have some consistency in how they apply a process like this. Not a lot of cities actually have this, but that's probably given the nature that they don't all have downtown areas with public right-of-way to provide this type of seating. In your staff memo, you have outlines of suggestions. They kind of fall into 3 different buckets that we would include in an ordinance. One, identifying the purpose and the public good, why we would allow this in our public right-of-way. The second is questions of process and administration, and then the third would be the ensuring that we're still maintaining safety, accessibility, and minimizing any negative impacts due to these items. As you can see, what staff would recommend in terms of purpose is these do support local businesses, both the restaurants that would be providing the sidewalk seating, but also it enhances the general areas that these would be established, provides life on the street, encourages human interaction, and it creates additional public space. In terms of process and administration, I'm not going through every bullet point in the memo. However, I'm pulling out some highlights from it. What staff would propose is that we issue these as a license on an annual basis, that we would approve these at an administrative, review and approve at an administrative level, that this purpose would be limited to businesses that regularly serve food and beverage, limiting the dates that these are allowed, given the volatile nature of our snowstorm situations from May 15th to October 15th. And as outlined in the previous staff memo and last year's discussion, was that these had previously been approved in an ad hoc basis with a limited consistency in how they were approved. And so we would suggest starting with a clean slate, and unless a business already had some sort of approval through a land use process, that all businesses who would like to use a sidewalk cafe go through the administrative approval process. As we look at safety, accessibility, and impact, staff is proposing to allow these in the zoning districts of B1, B5, and the DCB zoning districts. This is generally where we've found these before. When you look at a zoning map on here, really they're concentrated in more of the downtown area. There is one B1 district in the south area, I forget the street crossing, but it's where there's a round office building and a vet clinic.
Highland and E.
Thank you. And while there is a sidewalk there, the sidewalk is on County Road East, or it's not the city's jurisdiction to approve seating. So that's why it's primarily concentrated in the areas you see called out here. What staff would propose to be included in an ordinance is that cafes be limited to being located in the sidewalk and public right-of-way that the city has jurisdiction over, and that those cafes directly abut the building. In terms of ensuring that there's safe passage for pedestrians and that we're meeting ADA guidelines, we would recommend that the size of the cafe leave at least a 4-foot passageway, and then in areas with directly adjacent to a curb that there be an additional 2 feet. So many of these areas, it would be a 6-foot buffer along Washington Square. That might look a little different given the width of that area. And then also additionally that they allow for at least an 8-foot vertical clearance. And this picture just is not to scale. It was me putting lines in. In terms of impact, we would strongly recommend that licensees be responsible for any damage, the cost of remedying any damage that the use of public right-of-way causes, that additionally they would be responsible for maintaining cleanliness of the area, including up to a certain distance around the area of ensuring there's no litter or trash. We would also recommend that there's a minimum aesthetic requirements. We, given the use of public right-of-way, envision requirements that would enhance the public space and not detract from it from low-quality chairs, tables, barriers, etc. We're proposing that sidewalk cafes be limited in their hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. A lot of these are in residential areas, and this would minimize impact to neighbors. And then if alcohol is served, there's state requirements that must be imposed in addition to amending liquor licenses to allow for liquor service if that's what they intend to do in the outdoor area. Areas must be compact and contiguous to the building, and they do require a barrier that separates the service area from the sidewalk. We are not recommending that council take any action this evening. We're just here to request feedback on the information we put together. If what we're proposing is amenable to be, if council is amenable to that being included in an ordinance, we would be bringing back an ordinance likely at the next meeting for your guys' consideration and for a public hearing and a first reading of an ordinance.
Thank you. Well, I'll first note the ad hoc review process that happened during COVID, you know, I would have supported it. It makes sense. It was what we needed to do kind of in a crisis situation to give businesses a lifeline. But that's over now. And going forward, I think having a straightforward, predictable, formulaic process that any restaurant can apply for and is evaluated fairly based on reasonable criteria just makes sense. And this isn't going anywhere. It seems like more and more restaurants want to try and do this if they can. So we should have a regulatory structure that's fair and transparent and predictable for everybody. The only question I have, and it doesn't need to be answered tonight, is a proposed fee level near $150. I just want to know, how does that compare to other fees that we charge based on how laborious it is for staff? Are we just in line with that? And again, it doesn't need to be answered tonight. If you have some feedback, go for it. But
Mayor, I have feedback on that. We kind of looked at what would it cost for each person who needs to evaluate this administratively, an hour of their time, and that's generally how we structure our fees. So we feel that $150 is justifiable to cover staff's time to look at that individual application.
okay.
And with a renewal, at a lower fee. If nothing's changing, we don't need to completely reevaluate every year.
That's my question, yeah. If it's the same restaurant over and over again and you're basically just checking boxes the next year saying, has anything changed? No, it hasn't. That doesn't take $150 worth of time. So that makes sense. I have a question regarding the compact and contiguous to the main building. I want some clarity. Are we proposing that only if alcohol is served, or generally it applies to everybody?
That is language that's used, I believe, in the state statute permitting liquor laws. Generally, what we would be recommending is that they be contiguous with the building, directly abutting the building, not set at a distance away from it.
All right, thank you. Council, do we have any more feedback? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In general, I think pretty good. I didn't see anything that created any heartburn on my side. I thought the idea of encouraging and being supportive of these alternatives makes sense. I actually do think it adds to ambiance, that there is positive vibes that come from seeing people having their coffee on the sidewalk, et cetera, on a decent day anyway. The only question I had was, so there are places in both the north and south side of town where restaurants exist inside of other private development. They're not on city right away per se. Are there any implications positively or negatively in how this ordinance gets crafted that would say affect a restaurant that's down in Marina Triangle, not on the lakeside, but on the, in the shopping center area that wanted to do outside the front door kind of service, or in we have more strip mall type settings on the south end. Is there anything positively or negatively in here that would have impact that would either allow or prohibit those kinds of venues from having access?
I can speak to that. We're kind of all lopping right here. Many eyes have been on this. So we're specifically using sidewalk right-of-way to eliminate the possibility of it being a trail. That would be specifically outlined in that ordinance. Regarding private property and community development, help me if I'm incorrect, but this is for public right-of-way only, so I do not believe it would prohibit private entities, but regarding liquor, it would have to be that compact and contiguous. That area would have to be licensed for liquor, et cetera.
And so, for example, if there were a restaurant that were located in a private development like that, and they chose, with the acquiescence of the owner, the landlord, whomever, to want to offer this or set up picnic tables in a secluded part of the parking lot, or whatever that might end up looking like, they would not be subject to the requirements here. They wouldn't be, because it's private, doesn't fall into this jurisdiction. Is that sounding right?
It would depend if they served liquor or not.
I agree. Let's take the alcohol out of that conversation. They're just serving burgers and shakes.
I believe that would be okay, Mr. Lindahl.
Mayor, members of the council, the item before you tonight, as we've kind of talked about, is specifically related to sidewalk cafes or activity within the public right-of-way. And we certainly felt like starting here was the appropriate portion or place to start because of the past conversation and the potential this has to add street life to the community and needed space to those businesses that are in these more compact areas that don't have the same potential public or private space related to their individual businesses. So maybe more directly answer your question, excuse me, to look at the private areas, I've worked in communities that have looked at that a number of different ways. In some cases, they've wanted to go through a more like a conditional use permit process to lessen potential impacts to surrounding residential. I think if you're talking mostly in a strip mall setting, especially in the way that White Bear is developed right now, in those situations, I don't see the potential conflict, or I see very little potential conflict with surrounding residential uses, and so the potential alcohol becomes a public interest. The ADA access through these areas are a public interest. Maintaining the activity that, or the use of the parking lot as it's intended is a land use and public interest. But beyond that, I would say that the city has really can look at the private property owner and the development mall manager to put these areas in where they're appropriate and where they can be an amenity to those businesses.
That's a great answer, and I'm just looking for, I wouldn't want other businesses who aren't on the, who don't have the street to be disadvantaged by not being able to have something of a comparable nature, and I'm not hearing anything that suggests that's the case, so. Good. Thank you.
I kind of a follow-up to that, so I want to hang up there for a second.
Okay.
So I think I followed most of that, but I want some clarification on this public right-of-way versus private. My concern being, I don't want this to stop any business that historically has been operating, how they've been operating, as an outright prohibition. I understand it might change. I can, without naming names, there are patios that aren't attached and contiguous, compact and contiguous with the main building. That'll have to change. It doesn't mean they can't do it. It's just, it's kind of a reconfiguration. But what we're saying is this doesn't apply to private land. For example, if there were a restaurant on the lake near our marina that has historically had a patio, this doesn't stop them from continuing to do that because that's on private property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That was my concern. Thank you. Councilmember Jones.
If there is any liquor, and I could see where this would be a tough one, but I mean, I know that we've got rules for suspension or revoking of said. I would just like to see language. You don't pass the compliance ID check, you're done. Just, that's it. You're yanked for the year. But I just don't see that. A lot of people aren't going to be able to do it or jump through the state hoops to do that. My other question is, what if this is all great for restaurants, I'm nothing but hemp. I want to increase my floor sales square footage. Why can't I use this for extending my retail space? Why can't I do the same thing?
Yeah. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, that really comes down to drafting the ordinance to really focus and limit this to just in doing some research, as I'm sure staff already has, cities in their ordinance themselves refer to these as sidewalk cafes. And so it really is a food-oriented sort of service.
I'm just saying, what's the difference? I'm questioning the council going,
No, it's a good point. So in fairness, I mean, there's food being sold in the loosest sense of the term. So do we have to clarify that in the ordinance, how we're defining food?
Correct.
Okay. So there's a mechanism to do that, because I think that, I mean, that's certainly where, I don't want to see that. I mean, this is, I truly am contemplating a restaurant.
And we're good on that, Troy. So if, the Main Street comes together and says, here's these 20 retailers that want to do the same thing that we're offering to the restaurants, increasing their floor space, why can't we?
We call that Market Fest.
Yeah, you can,
9 times,
you
yeah.
can do it 7 times out of the summer. So without wordsmithing this too much, just questions for our city attorney, should we bake in a qualifier that pursuant to the otherwise license that they have or other licensing structure? I mean, my understanding is restaurants fall under a different category than, for example, Nothing But Hemp or a grocery store or all these different things. Is that the mechanism by which we do that, or can we just be explicit and define food however we want?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor and council, it really does come down to definitions, and I haven't been asked to work on this yet, so I haven't thought it all the way through. But, just in the time sitting here, I found 4 or 5 different examples, as I'm sure staff has, that have defined these things to limit them to what we're all thinking, coffee shops and restaurants and that kind of thing, and not other
Someone
sorts
comes
of
knocking on
businesses.
our door. That's my question for future answers. Someone comes knocking.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might, I mean, ultimately, that's a policy question for you folks on whether you want to expand it to retail. But right now, it sounds like what staff's proposing is just, this idea of restaurant.
Totally understand.
Mayor, members of the council, we do currently have an ordinance that states you cannot sell things on public property. You cannot make a profit on public property unless it's related to a special event. I don't have that code number cited right
Restaurants
now.
don't make profit on food.
But we're talking about discussing an ordinance that would
I know. I'm
imply
just saying,
that. So
let's be transparent and fair.
Yep, I'm just giving you the information.
Yeah, I know.
No, I'm following you. The default is you can't do that anyways. So we just got to be narrow with what this exception carves out, as long as you check the right boxes. I think it
I'm
alleviates
fine
my
with
fears.
this,
There's a
believe me.
mechanism to do it, and I think we're kind of on the same page in the direction we want to go. Okay. Any other thoughts from council on this? Councilmember Wall.
Quick feedback. I don't see a need for annual renewal. The 150, okay, because there's some staff time involved. But if you're going to make them do this every year, like you said, $0 to renew or close to zero. Let's not make this an onerous thing. It's well thought out. There's a lot here, maybe even too much here, but well thought out. Let's not make this a big deal. This should be easy after the initial one. So that's some feedback from me.
My feedback on that would be, I would actually like that after the second year, because if something has gone wrong that first time, I want it brought up when they come back for their annual renewal. I was trying with the mic, I was trying.
Yeah, well, you're getting better.
She
Okay,
needs
any other
remedial
comments
classes.
on this? I think you have the direction that you need to take to the next level. Great, thank you. All right, item 10, communications from the city manager. Ms. Crawford, do you have anything?
I do have a few slides tonight. We have several events coming up. Okay, so it's Hockey Day Minnesota this weekend. I think everyone is well aware of that. Starts Thursday, concludes on Sunday. It's actually in the township, but there will be many people who are from our community who go there and vice versa. So some information on your screen there, tickets where they can be sold, more information on that. Next slide. Then the following weekend, before our next council meeting, is the Barely Open. This is a coordinated partnership with the Rotary Club and the Food Shelf, our Wiper events, to raise money for the Food Shelf. There's an online auction, a community dance, and then golfing on ice, and I have a website there. For more information, you do have to sign up. There is a small nominal fee, but it does go to the Wiper Area Food Shelf.
The slide says realistic golf
I read
course.
that. That's a little.
Is that
Yeah.
humor? I mean, it's cool, it's fun, but realistic golf?
So Public Works creates
Realistic
a golf
golf course.
course out there. There are props, there
I
are.
know, I've been there, but I'm just thinking.
There's a ball, there's a hole.
That's strange.
Okay, all right.
It's fun. Man.
Tough crowd tonight,
Yeah.
not just Dan.
All right, okay. Okay, then we do have our first applicant for our newly implemented concept plan review process, that new ordinance that we just adopted. So the neighborhood meeting for 2502 County Road E will be Thursday, February 2nd from 7 to 8 p.m. The City Council and Planning Commission and those surrounding that property, we did expand it beyond 350 feet for the notice. You will receive a notice in the mail, is what I'm trying to say. So this will be our first project at that is at Ian Bel Air. Many Faces is hosting an event on accessibility, welcoming practices for the blind and visually impaired on February 2nd from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. At Century College. There's no cost, and that is open to the public. And then the Chamber of Commerce, they have their 2023 legislative reception Thursday, March 2nd from 4:30 to 7 p.m. at Tria Restaurant. You do have to register, and then we'll discuss this at a future council meeting, but I do just want to acknowledge it is this year marks 100 years of the Wiper Area Chamber, so that's pretty special, and I think there will probably be some events throughout the year for that. I'm not sure if I have anything else. Anything else? Okay, that's all I have.
Great. Thank you. We have one more item on our agenda, a closed session, which means we have to kick everybody out. And in order to get into that, I need a motion from someone.
Mr. Mayor.
Very specific.
I make a motion to close this meeting pursuant to Minnesota statutes, section 13D.05, subdivision 3A, to evaluate the performance of the city manager.
Well projected. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Do I have a second? A motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? To a closed session. We'll take about 2 or 3 minutes to get the technology squared away, and then we'll jump in.